If you have a comment or question regarding Channel 6 programming, call us at 818-548-4013.
Good evening, and welcome to the June 21st, 2011 meeting of the Glendale City Council. Can we have a roll call, please?
Council members Manukian, Najarian,
Here.
Quintero,
Here.
Weaver,
Here.
Mayor Friedman.
Here, I would like to ask Councilmember Quintero to lead us in tonight's Pledge of Allegiance.
Please rise.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing for the invocation. Today marks the official beginning of the summer season, but summer also marks the hard work of so many of our young graduates from our public and private high schools and Glendale Community College. Let us pray that the next generation of leaders embarks on a journey met with great success and many life-reaffirming moments. Let us pray that they will continue upon the path of learning and lead others who will follow them along that same path, so that we may conquer our obstacles and overcome the challenges that face our great nation and our community here in Glendale. Let us also give thanks for the wonderful parents, teachers, and administrators with whom we as a city have been blessed. Our schools and the people in them are beyond compare and deserve our gratitude and prayer wishes. We also pray for those young men and women who, after graduating, will enlist in armed services or who are currently deployed. We pray for peace and compassion today and always. Amen.
Thank you. Can we hear your report, please?
The agenda for the June 21, 2011 regular meeting of the Glendale City Council was posted on Thursday, June 16, 2011 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Thank you. Our next order of business is the preview of meetings. Ms. Beers?
Madam Bear, we'll go to John Tectalian, Assistant to the City Manager.
Good evening, Mayor Friedman, members of the City Council. Next week's Glendale Housing Authority, there is one item under 6B. It's the Director of Community Development regarding professional services agreement change orders related to the 2011-2012 housing program budget in support of affordable housing activities. There's also one item on the Glendale Redevelopment Agency agenda at 6A is the Director of Administrative Services regarding adoption of the Redevelopment Agency budget for fiscal year 11-12. In the afternoon, there will also be a joint City Council and Glendale Financing Authority meeting. Again, the Director of Administrative Services will provide a report regarding the budget adoption for the Finance Authority. Moving on to the City Council agenda in the afternoon, there's a number of consent items. At 5B is the Director of Public Works regarding contract amendments for maintenance and repairs of generators, elevators, and rolling doors in city-owned buildings. 5C, Director of Public Works regarding proposals received to provide on-call HVAC repair and maintenance services at various city facilities. 5D is the Director of Public Works and Community Development Director regarding fiscal year 2010-2011 ADA curb ramp repairs and sidewalk repairs installation program. Moving on to action items, there's quite a few. At 8A is the Director of Administrative Services regarding levy of annual assessments and preparation of the engineer's report for fiscal year 11-12 for the North San Fernando Road Corridor Landscape Maintenance District. At 8B is the Director of Administrative Services regarding the adoption of the fiscal year 11-12 City of Glendale budget. 8C, Director of Community Services and Parks regarding Phase 2 construction work of the Glendale Adult Recreation Center project. 8D, Director of Community Services and Parks regarding grant application to the statewide park development and community revitalization program. At 8E is the Director of Human Resources regarding memorandum of understanding between the city and the Glendale Management Association. At 8F is the Director of Human Resources regarding severance to salaried employees laid off and separated effective July 1st, 2011 as a result of budgetary reductions for fiscal year 11-12. At 8G is the Director of Administrative Services regarding annual GWP transfer. And at 8H is the Director of Administrative Services regarding adoption of the city's 2011-12 GAN appropriation limits. And finally, under hearings, there's two items. At 9A and B are Director of Community Development regarding the Glendale Register of Historic Resource Listings and Mills Act contract for properties located at 1345 Cordova Avenue and 804 West Kenneth Road, respectively.
Thank you. Next item, please.
At 3B is a proclamation designating the week of June 20 through the 26, 2011 as Amateur Radio Week.
Thank you. And I have a proclamation, which I'm going to read before I invite you. You're welcome to come up, but the proclamation reads, whereas amateur radio provides emergency communications to our community and to the nation at large when a disaster strikes, it is an integral part of Homeland Security. And whereas there are currently over 500 amateur radio operators licensed by the FCC within the City of Glendale who are equipped and trained to provide volunteer communication support in times of need, and whereas Glendale Emergency Auxiliary Radio Service, GEARS, continues to support our community with communication for parades, runs, hikes, and other events, as well as providing emergency backup communications to the City of Glendale, and whereas Crescenta Valley Radio Club provides repeaters use by GEARS in support of community events and backup communications to the City of Glendale, and whereas June 25th through 26th, CVRC and GEARS will participate in an annual event known as Field Day at Verdugo Park, a nationwide test of emergency amateur radio communication from isolated locations replicating emergency conditions. And now, therefore, I, Laura Friedman, Mayor of Glendale, proclaim June 20th through 26th, 2011 as Amateur Radio Week, and encourage all Glendale residents and employees to acknowledge the outstanding support provided to our community by amateur radio service. And I believe that this commendation is going to be accepted by Joe Pardo from GEARS and Mark Gershon from the Crescenta Valley Radio Club.
One correction, Mayor, we have Larry Cohen.
Microphone.
Oh, come on up to the microphone, please. And I'm going to ask my colleague, Mr. Weaver, to present the proclamation.
Mr. Larry Cohen will be taking Mark's place tonight. He is the Vice President of the Crescenta Valley Radio Club.
Great. Well, welcome.
Seems like just yesterday I presented you one.
Yes.
Last year, 15 years, you play a vital role in the community, a very quiet one. Most people don't know exists, but extremely vital at the right times in emergencies. So congratulations to all of you. How's your group growing? Are you growing?
We're working on it.
Well, we have grown a little bit.
A little bit. We'll keep growing.
It's hard to compete with cell phones.
Yeah, and Facebook and Twitter, and yeah, I got you. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Mayor Friedman, City Council, and citizens of Glendale. My name is Joe Pardo. I am the City Radio Officer for the Glendale Emergency Auxiliary Radio Service. The Crescenta Valley Radio Club and Glendale Emergency Auxiliary Radio Service invite the public to join us for Field Day at Verdugo Park, located across from Glendale Community College this coming weekend, June 25th and 26th. Visitors are welcome to stop by to see amateur radios in action. During this event, we welcome you to try out the radios and say hello across the country. Hope to see you there. At this time, we would like to present a video providing a glimpse into the world of amateur radio and its use in emergency communications.
All of us will remember the 2002 fire season. Years of drought, record temperatures, plenty of fuel. At times it seemed all of America was burning. I'm Walter Cronkite. I'd like you to hear something.
Situation. Electricity's out in the entire town, and I may have the only working generator. QSL loud and clear. Do you have any priority messages?
They're just two average guys who saw the need and volunteered.
All the other stations, please stand by.
They're radio hams, amateurs, giving of their own time and spending their own money, trying to help out when and where America needs it most. Not just at wildfires, but at earthquakes, hurricanes, tornadoes.
Just one tornado now, the other one died.
At floods, at any disaster. Hams belonging to amateur radio's emergency groups were called out on September 11th when America came under attack. Cell phone and landline circuits were jammed and virtually useless. But dozens of radio amateurs helped the police and fire departments and other emergency services maintain communications in New York, Pennsylvania, and Washington, D.C. Their country asked, and they responded without reservation. But being a good Samaritan sometimes brings with it a risk. And sometimes it's not just risky, it's downright dangerous.
There's a gas leak. Let's go. Turn around. Gas leak.
That's exactly what happened in Colorado in June 2002 on the 137,000-acre Hayman fire. This is rural America out here. You can't always rely on a cell phone and when you need help.
It looks like the wind shifted back to the west and or northwest, and it's moving the fire back in this direction.
The fire is just right over this ridge here behind me. It's starting to get close. Looks like we're going to have to prepare to get out of here pretty shortly.
The sky had already turned ominously dark. The air was thick with smoke, making breathing more difficult. The sun reduced in intensity to little more than a light bulb through the smoky haze. The wind, increasing in speed, began blowing the fire toward the volunteers.
The sheriff came through a little bit ago and asked us how fast we could get out of here. We're basically right across the road from the last fire line.
So they stood by their radios, handling emergency communications for the police, the fire, the Teller County Office of Emergency Services.
This is West Creek Fire.
Ted, could I get a status update, your location, please?
Things are pretty quiet. Firefighters should be coming in for supper before long.
The role of amateur radio operators in this particular event has been very significant. We've provided a lot of communication capability. We're in an area where it's difficult to communicate. As a result, our capabilities greatly enhance the efforts of law enforcement, of firefighting, of the Red Cross, and the Salvation Army.
It takes a lot of cheeseburgers to fight a forest fire.
Okay.
Thank you.
In the end, there was a break in the weather. The winds changed, and all of the emergency workers, the firefighters, the police, the radio amateurs, handling the communications, all of them were safe.
This is WG0N. I'll be coming back to the command center.
You know, we call them radio amateurs, but their skill levels are anything but amateur.
These are people who in any other realm would be called professionals. They're the people who know how to put the pieces together, know how to build the networks, know how to get information from one place to another when every other system has failed. I don't think that's amateur.
Ham radio has been around for 100 years, but that doesn't mean out of date. Even America's Space Shuttle and the International Space Station have ham radio on board, and it's not just for the enjoyment of the crew.
Do you tend to reevaluate your life when you look at the Earth? Over.
When you float up here above the Earth in our little spacecraft and look down at the great big spacecraft that we all fly on, it makes us all think about what our priorities are. Over.
Someone once said, and it's probably true, that amateur radio is the only fail-safe communication system in the world. Many of you know I'm a sailor. I really enjoy being on the sea with the wind at my back, underway, under sail. What most of you don't know is I'm a radio ham too. My call is KB2GSD. And you can bet that when I'm on the ocean, even if the GPS, the radar, and the ship-to-shore fail, I've still got my ham radio station. It really is the best backup communication system in the world. And that's the way it is.
Mayor, Council, thank you very much.
Thank you. You know, watching this, it really shows that it's about people helping people, and it's very much about you doing this in your spare time just to help keep the community safe. And I think I speak for all of Glendale when I say we're really appreciative. And we know that with all that technology out there, that it can fail, and that the technology that you use is very stable. And I feel better knowing that we have this network of community members who are able to communicate in case of an emergency. So,
thank you, and our team is right here with us.
Do you all want to introduce yourselves again? And if you want to say anything? Oh, come on up to the microphone, please. To the folks at home.
Elliot Graham, K7 ESG. I'm a general licensed operator. Glad to be a part of both Gears and Crescendo Valley.
My name is Bill Jeffrey, KE6IMH, and I am a general also And I just started last year, although I've had the license for a long time. And I think it's a good opportunity for me and chance to help and chance to learn things. Thank you.
My name's Eddie Einem. Call sign is KD6TAV. I've been a ham for, I think, about 17 years, and currently I use it for when I go off-roading and keep in contact with my family.
My name is Larry Cohen. I'm the Vice President of the Crescenta Valley Radio Club and also a Gears member. My call sign is AD6IZ, Alpha Delta 6 India Zulu, and I'm an extra class amateur radio operator. Thank you.
Thank you, team. One last thing I want to mention. We're doing Field Day at Verdugo Park. And it's not only an event that we prepare for Field Day, but it's also allowing us to see the surrounding territory, set up the equipment, so in case of an emergency, we can set up at Verdugo Park and provide communications to the city across the world if necessary.
Well, thank you all so much, and congratulations.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the recognition.
Okay, next item, please.
3C is the reappointment of Laura Parazian to the Housing Authority. This was a nomination brought forth by you, Mayor, on June 14th, 2011.
Thanks. And before I entertain a motion, I would just like to say a few words about Ms. Parazian, because she has served as a volunteer on the Housing Authority since 2003. And I think that's pretty remarkable. Laura Parazian serves on the Housing Authority as a tenant member. She was first appointed in 2003 and was reappointed in 2005, 2007, and 2009. During her tenure on the Housing Authority, Ms. Parazian has participated in voting to support numerous affordable housing programs and projects that service the needs of thousands of lower-income households. Ms. Parazian has brought a unique understanding to the Housing Authority, and she's a strong supporter and advocate for many in the Glendale community. Ms. Parazian is married, has one son, and has lived in Glendale since 1990. She's indicated that she would be more than willing to accept and serve another term on the Housing Authority so that she can continue to help families in Glendale in need of affordable housing services. And I can say that after serving with her for 2.5 years, that you will not find a more compassionate and caring commissioner out there in Glendale. She's really a wonderful person to serve with. So with that, I'll entertain a motion.
3C.
Second.
Okay, can we have a roll call, please?
Council members Manukian, Najarian.
Yes.
Otero.
Yes.
Weaver.
Aye.
Mayor Friedman.
Yes. Thank you. Next item, please.
City Council and staff comments.
Mr. Weaver.
First off, on this one issue, I would like to apologize to my colleagues. For yesterday, I was emotionally and physically spent after my wife made sure that I had the entire house clean, presentable for my grandson's first birthday party, which I ended up on the couch observing rather than participating, and I think I should have stayed home yesterday too, except I had too many meetings. So I do apologize. I'm saying that I wasn't going to vote for the budget. Totally stupid comment on my part. Of course I will vote for it. As you know, I'm very passionate about the Glendale Rose Float, and it's got about a 30-day lease on life. But what it will take is the community of Glendale coming forth and helping raise $50,000 in the next 30 days. If there's enough people at home or companies in this city that care about the float, you can send your donation to the city, City of Glendale Finance Department, 141 North Glendale Avenue, room 346. That's 91206. I'll have a slide by next week. You will receive a thank you letter back with a form from the IRS indicating our 501c3 status as a city, allowing you to then deduct it on your income tax. So again, my apologies, but I hate to see after 97 years see our float go away, Tournament Roses Parade. Two other items that I'm allowed to tell you about today. Met with Rick Caruso, and he told me that Walt Disney Company is opening a new store in the Americana called the Disney Baby. It'll be the first one in the world, and they have picked the Americana at Brand in Glendale in which to open it. Assume it's still it's clothing line, I understand. And the second one, he has another store that'll be opening there very shortly now, Apple Store. And it will be the largest Apple store in the state of California. So it's like the other one, I presume you will be able to take classes there to learn how to operate iPads, etc. So look for that one to open. I think it's right near the concierge. You come out by the clock there. So stand by for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Quintero.
Some of us attended the Glendale Chamber of Commerce gala on Friday evening, very well attended, and the new president is Jeannie Brewer, who is the general manager and owner of Glendale Acura. So I want to congratulate her and all the members that made it a very memorable event.
Mr. Najarian.
I'd just like to congratulate all the graduates from Glendale and the GUSD school district, from CV, Hoover, Glendale High, as well as all those middle schoolers. Middle school graduation I attended was Rosemont. And thank you very much, seniors, for celebrating in a responsible way. As far as I know, we did not have any tragic alcohol-related accidents over the weekend while thousands of kids were celebrating their graduation. So keep up the good work and welcome to the real world. If you're not going to college, that is. But we hope you are going to college, but
otherwise no jobs.
You're starting to get into the real world.
Thank you. First, I would like to nominate Brej Mardian for the Building and Fire Board of Appeals Commission. Mr. Mardian has served on the Historic Preservation Commission, and I believe he is an architect, licensed architect. And he's proven himself very admirably, and he desires to serve on this commission. Next, I just wanted to mention a few events that I attended last week. First, the Sir Optimus International of Glendale's Installation Lunch. It's such a great group that raises money and promotes causes, particularly for women and children around the world and in Glendale. And they work very hard, always bring a lot of value to the community, and they installed their new officers. Their president's returning again, and our own Yasmin Beers won an award, the Laurel Society. She was inducted into the Laurel Society of Sir Optimus, which is a great honor for her many years of service. I think you've been in Sir Optimus since you were 12 years old, right? They said 20 years, I think they said. But congratulations to all of the officers, incoming and outgoing, and thanks for the work you do. I also attended the gala. It was, as Mr. Quintero said, very well attended. I look forward to working with Ms. Brewer and the rest of the chamber. Business assistance has been a priority of mine, especially last year while I was chair of the redevelopment agency. And we need to continue to find ways to support our local business and to grow our economy, and I look forward to working closely with the chamber to do that. And lastly, I also attended one graduation this year, which was for the Davidian Mariamian Educational Foundation, which is a group that works in conjunction with the Glendale Unified School District to provide after-school programs for students, particularly to learn about the Armenian culture and Armenian language. And to see this wonderful group of students reciting poetry, singing, performing, it was really great to see because, they're not just going to school and dealing with school and graduation, they're committing themselves to learning other activities, learning other things, and, anything extra we can do in terms of learning is always, really valuable. So I commend all of the parents, all of the volunteers, the teachers, the foundation, and of course the students. Thank you. Are there any staff comments?
Madam Mayor and Council, we'd like to announce on behalf of the City Clerk's Office that this Thursday, June 23, from 6:30 to 8 p.m., we will be holding our annual, and now one of two annual, rabies vaccination clinics. This is a low-cost vaccination clinic. It is for dogs and cats. There will also be ID microchips available for pets for $45 for anyone interested in having that for their pet. You can see the number to call up there, which is the City Clerk's Office number for more information. And it's always a well-attended event. especially in times where every dollar and cent counts. We get quite a turnout for people coming to receive these low-cost vaccinations for their family's favorite pet. Thank you.
Thank you. Next item, please.
Next item, under consent items 5A through D, the following are routine and may be acted upon by one motion. Any member of council or the audience requesting separate consideration may do so, may make such request before a motion is proposed.
Move the consent calendar.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Can we have a roll call, please?
Council members Manukian, Najarian.
Yes.
Quintero.
Yes.
Beaver.
Aye.
Mayor Friedman.
Yes. Next item, please.
Next item would be oral communications.
Okay, this is the 3-minute portion of oral communications. I have 4 cards. First card is a shared card, Steve Pierce and Mike Shar. They'll be followed by Barry Allen.
Thank you, Mayor Friedman, council members, and staff. My name is Steve Pierce. I'm representing the CV Fireworks Association. And I'd like to introduce our president of our Fireworks Association this year, Mr. Mike Shar.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Mayor and City Council. I'm here dressed in red, white, and blue to promote the official fireworks show for the City of Glendale. And we, as usual, thank the City Council for their support over the years on this. This year, the event will once again take place at La Crescenta Elementary, and gates will open at 4 p.m. We're expecting a lot of people, so we'd love to see the council and the residents of the City of Glendale come out for the event. The event will once again just be $5 for adults, and children 2 and under are free. And this year also military personnel who have their ID will also be free. We'd like to encourage everyone to come out early. It's going to be a great time. We're going to have carnival rides on the field. This year, we're going to be having food trucks come for the event. We've got 4 trucks: Let It Be Frank, Border Grill, No Tomatoes, and Frozen Crush, along with popcorn and cotton candy at the event. And then just before from 5 o'clock to 8:30, we're going to be having a live band. The Sardo Brothers will be playing 50s, 60s, and 70s rock and roll music. So you can come down there. I think there may even be some dancing available if anybody's interested in that. And then the fireworks show will commence at 8:30, and there'll be a special commemoration to our military members prior to the event. Anything else? There's a beautiful flyer that Steve just got hot off the press, which we're going to leave for your city clerk, which has the highlights of the event. That's there. And we look forward to seeing the city council and the city of Glendale at the event, so I hope you all can make it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I feel like go on, Steve. Were you going to say something?
No, I was just going to say, this is the City of Glendale's fireworks event, so we encourage everyone from Glendale to come up to the La Crescenta area for this event. It is a huge fireworks event and one of the best in Southern California. So
Great. It's always a great event, so hope to see everyone there.
And Steve does have tickets if anybody's interested, as well as, this is a nonprofit organization, and so we've got envelopes that we'll leave if anybody's interested in making a contribution to the event. Thanks.
Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you.
See you there. Barry Allen, followed by Leon Mayer.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, staff. I'm Barry Allen. And just a reminder, the Vanguardians Town Hall this Thursday at 8 a.m. at Foxy's on Colorado, across from the Americana. And the topic is, who's telling the truth about the cost of the fire department changes? Fool me once, it's your fault. Fool me twice, it's mine. Fire Chief Hines was going to bring millions into the city coffers by doing away with private ambulance service. We were fooled to the tune of $30 million of red ink. Fire Chief Scoggins said that Hines' model doesn't work.
Point of order, Madam Mayor. Is this argument or is this an announcement for his?
This is a portion of oral communications for community
Madam Mayor, members of
events.
council, it's certainly your discretion to limit the speaker to the announcement of his event and not engage in fuller public discussion that's more appropriate for the second half of the oral communications part of the agenda.
Okay. So if you can
Thank you.
tell us the topic and when and where.
Yeah, I'm doing it. I'm telling you the same thing we hear when we hear a book review or anything else that's coming up at a program. Am I right, Councilmember Najarian?
I want to know who your special guest is this week, Mr.
I think it's going to be you. You made a reservation.
You're surprising
Thank you.
me now.
Fire Chief Scoggins says the Heinz model doesn't work. By going to basic life support, driven by cheap labor, will do us better. When you see the real numbers, you'll ask for his resignation along with the council members supporting him. Added overtime and CalPERS payments. The first time you're fooled, you can be forgiven, it being unexpected. The second time you're fooled means you're foolish for falling for it again. Fire officials have been invited to respond to this public forum. And again, make your reservations. I'm Barry Alman of Vanguardians, and I think we've stayed within our time frame and the topic matter. And it's at Foxy's, 8 o'clock this Thursday. And I believe Mr. Najarian is going to be our surprise guest. Thank you.
Well, there goes the surprise.
See?
Leon Mayer, and then Ron Farina is my last card.
Good evening, Mayor Friedman, members of the council and staff. My name is Leon Mayer, and I'm here on behalf of the library and the Friends of the Library, I guess myself as well as a volunteer. And before I make my announcement about our next speaker, who is Vince Bugliosi, who's been known, lived in Glendale for a long time, lived in Pasadena, and I'll talk a little bit about him in a second because most people know a lot about Vince Bugliosi. But I would like to take a few seconds to thank those in the community, those on the council and the related staff officers in the city of Glendale for the support you've given the Library of Glendale. Just to give you an example of some of the things we do, we have, this is put on not by the Friends but by the library, we have this famous old movies every Tuesday. And 2 o'clock, they're free, and they're just terrific. And I'm not going to give you the list of the ones you've missed, but if you're going to be around next Tuesday afternoon, Woody Allen is going to talk, his movie Zelig will be shown, one of his famous movies. So this is just an example of some of the things that the library does for the community. And of course, one of the things that I do as a member of the Friends is to chair the Author, Artists, and Friends series, which we've been doing for almost 11 years now. And our next event is going to be July 27th, Vince Bugliosi, to talk about his book, Divinity of Doubt, the God Question. And this is kind of a controversial book because Vince, during his career as a DA and prosecuted 25 murder trials with a conviction, prosecuted 106 felony cases with 105 convictions. He wrote the book Helter Skelter based on the Charles Manson case, which became the most publicized true crime story in history. And he's also written the big book about the assassination of John F. Kennedy, putting to sleep the theory or the idea that there was a conspiracy of some sort. He's also written books about critical of the Supreme Court. He's a great author, and he has written this book called Divinity of Doubt, the God Question. And I'm not going to go into detail at this time. As I get closer to the event, I might give you more details about it. But in the book, he makes a connection to other agnostics. He's an agnostic. He doesn't believe in Christianity or Judaism, and he doesn't believe in atheism. And he criticizes both of those sides in his book. But he makes a connection to the agnostics of history. Going back to Socrates. Socrates was an agnostic. So was Clarence Darrow. So was Charles Darwin. So was Einstein. So was Gertrude Stein. So his book also is great for the history of the various religions of the world. So it's going to be a very challenging but interesting evening for those who are able to take the time to come to the library on July 27th, 7 o'clock in the evening. Parking is validated. We encourage you to park at the structure on Maryland and get validated for 3 hours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Mayor, for continuing to come week after week with these important community announcements.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Ron Farina is my last card.
Good evening, Mayor Friedman, City Council, and City Management staff. I've come here many, many times, but I probably have never put in a word for blood services, and I wanted to do that tonight. I wanted to invite everyone in the community that's able to donate blood to consider giving blood this summer. You know, we need to have healthy blood. There's just no replacement for it. Surgeries don't often take place when there's a shortage of blood. O positive is the universal donor. That blood is always needed, but there's also rare types. To give blood, you only need to call 1-800-GIVE-LIFE to make an appointment. We have blood drives in this community fairly often. I think once a week we have one at the Glendale Civic Auditorium. Usually it's a Tuesday or a Thursday. They usually start about 1 in the afternoon till 8 o'clock at night. If you make an appointment ahead of time, you'll avoid that waiting line and get in and make your donation and then leave. It's right across from Glendale City College, so consider making a blood donation this summer as one of those things you need to do if you're healthy. You feel great and you've done a great service, and blood is more important than ever for successful surgeries. I also wanted to say that today I had a real nice experience going out to the Forest Lawn Museum. I really have seen the city from various viewpoints, but I don't think there's a finer viewpoint of the city, of the skyscraper, than from the museum. That's going to be the location of our wine event, so I was carefully leading into that. That's a wine event is coming up this Thursday at the Forest Lawn Museum. Fritz Coleman's going to be there as our guest MC. We're going to have catering by Chin Chin, chocolates by Mignon. There's going to be fine wine to taste. The price tickets are $60 per person or $100 per couple. We need your support. We hope you can make it. And the artist that's there currently at the museum her name is Artist Lane. She's got bronze works. She has a bronze works of Ronald Reagan. She has oil portraits of John F. Kennedy, Jacqueline Kennedy, President Obama, and his wife. So there's a lovely museum, if you haven't been up there, with the changing artist exhibits. And thank you for this opportunity. Good evening.
Thank you so much. Okay, next item, please.
Next item is adoption of ordinances, and at 7A is a ordinance authorizing the execution of a second amendment to the Statutory Development Agreement and Participation Agreement by and between the City of Glendale, together with the Glendale Redevelopment Agency and DreamWorks Animation, LLC. This was offered on June 14, 2011 by Councilmember Weaver.
Mayor, I'll move 7A.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Can we have a roll call, please?
Council members Manukian, Najarian.
Yes.
Montero.
Yes.
Weaver.
Aye.
Mayor Friedman.
Yes. Next item, please.
Your action items at 8A is the General Manager of Glendale Water and Power regarding 2010 Urban Water Management Plan. At 8A1 is a resolution adopting the plan.
Thank you. Mr. Kavunas.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the Council. I'm Peter Kavunas, Assistant General Manager for Glendale Water and Power Water Services. The action before you tonight is a resolution to adopt our Urban Water Management Plan. The utility has prepared the Urban Water Management Plan in accordance with the law, and we are required to prepare this plan once every 5 years. The purpose of the plan is to look at reasonable projections of growth in the area that we serve and describe our water supplies and how we plan to have supplies available to meet those reasonable projections of growth. We're also required to discuss any threats to our water supplies as well as our efforts on water conservation. The plan has been prepared in-house and has been made available for public review as required by law. We have publicized its availability. We have held a public hearing at the June Glendale Water and Power Commission meeting, have received some fairly limited public input, and we have a plan that's before you that is ready for adoption by your council. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions? No questions? Then I'll entertain a motion.
Yeah, move 8A.
Second.
8A1.
Okay, roll call, please.
Council members Manukian, Najarian,
Yes.
Harrow,
Yes.
Weaver,
Aye.
Mayor Friedman.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Salinas.
Thank you very much.
Okay, item 8B.
It'd be a city attorney regarding discussion regarding the city's moratorium on medical marijuana dispensaries and initiation of code amendments to ban medical marijuana dispensaries. B1 is motion providing direction to staff.
Thank you. Are we going to Chief DePompa or?
First to me, Madam Mayor and members of the council, and then I'm going to, Chief DePompa is going to address the issues, some issues related to secondary impacts of medical marijuana dispensaries. The item before you is a follow-up to the city's adoption of moratoria ordinances starting in 2009 and continuing to 2010 to preserve the status quo and prohibit medical marijuana dispensaries in the city so that the city could study the impacts of dispensaries and continue to review the evolving legal landscape regarding dispensaries. There was a case involving the city of Anaheim that we had anticipated would be decided one way or the other related to a local jurisdiction's ability to ban medical marijuana dispensaries. The Court of Appeal in that case did sort of punt, if you will, and decided not to address that particular issue, but address the issue of whether or not federal law preempted the Compassionate Use Act, which has adopted in 1996 and has caused many cities to permit medical marijuana dispensaries within their jurisdictions. So after that case, we decided it was appropriate to bring the matter back before the council. The moratoria that the city adopted is set to expire September 21st of this year. And this report is actually from our office, the police chief's office, and the director of community development with respect to a request or a recommendation that the city direct staff to prepare the appropriate code amendments to ban the medical marijuana dispensaries within the city. And with that, I'll turn it over to Chief DePompa to discuss some of the issues related to medical marijuana dispensaries.
Okay, let me first see if there's any questions for Mr. Garcia from council. Okay, seeing none. Chief, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Ron DePompa, Police Chief. And we are here, obviously, in strong support of initiating this ordinance to prohibit medical marijuana dispensaries in the city of Glendale. And as noted by our city attorney, we have been operating under a moratorium and would like to move into an actual ordinance that prohibits long-term the establishments of these in the city of Glendale. We have a variety of concerns related to the secondary effects noted with medical marijuana dispensaries in terms of crime and public safety issues. We have seen this occur throughout the state of California since the passage of Proposition 215 and the proliferation of these dispensaries. Currently, they are prohibited in Burbank, La Cañada, and Pasadena. However, our shared borders with Los Angeles brings us into close proximity with many, many dispensaries. So we see the effects from those spilling into our communities. And there's a variety of general areas that we have concern with that I'll illustrate for you, and if there's specific questions or you want specific examples, we can give those for you. First is the crime actually associated with the dispensaries in and of themselves. They are frequently the targets of vandals, burglars, robbery attempts, and such. They typically generate a high degree of profit, and as a result are attractive targets for these types of criminal behaviors. Additionally, we have concerns with the crime associated with the clientele that they attract and bring into the area. And our research and observations with other jurisdictions that house medical marijuana dispensaries bears this out, that there are very specific crime issues associated with those dispensaries in the surrounding areas. Thirdly, we're very concerned about the negative influx of marijuana use that it brings into a community. Recently, I addressed the council on issues of drug abuse occurring in the northern part of our community, specifically in the La Crescenta area, and we noted that in adjoining Sunland Tahunga area there are in excess of a dozen dispensaries in very close proximity, and we've seen a great influx of marijuana into that community. Young people who obtain medical marijuana cards go to these facilities, they obtain marijuana, they bring it back into the community, and it is distributed to our kids in that area. And that in turn then leads to experimentation and abuse of other drugs as well. So we are very concerned with the proliferation of marijuana coming into the area. Additionally, I bring you back to just a couple years ago when we had a major marijuana cultivation occurring in the hillsides above Crescenta Valley Park, with literally hundreds of pounds of high-grade Sensimilla marijuana taken off those hillsides. We know that these very large, sophisticated grows are supplying many of our local dispensaries, and that many of them are controlled by Mexican drug cartels. It is highly profitable, and under the guise of medical marijuana and Prop 215 provisions, it allows these criminal enterprises to operate under a degree of camouflage, if you will. And these bring very dangerous elements into the community. We know for a fact that these are guarded by individuals with firearms, representing a threat not only to law enforcement, but any of our community members that might happen into those particular areas. So the dangers of cultivation are very real. You will note that in the report we've included in Exhibit D a variety of anecdotal examples of how we encounter marijuana every day, day in and day out, and how it's illustrative of a very strong correlation with other criminal types of behavior. And I think that's well established. To not do so, to not establish a prohibitive ordinance, it's going to leave the police department with an additional burden that we don't have the resources or budget or manpower to effectively police and enforce. So we are highly recommending that City Council approve this and that we move forward with this effort, and we're pleased to answer any specific questions you might have.
Mr. Weaver.
Chief, how is this going to be magnified with the governor's early release of prisoners into our community?
Well, it creates an additional burden on our law enforcement resources, obviously with significant early release felons coming back into the area and the high level of recidivism that is associated with these individuals. We know that we're going to be very taxed in trying to enforce and suppress the criminal activities that will result. And of course, many of them, as I mentioned earlier, in excess of 50% will come back with substance abuse issues. And so to create an environment where at least we can keep marijuana dispensaries out of our community will help. It will help in terms of our resources, and will help in terms of dealing with this particular population that will be coming back to our area.
Did we have any idea how many felons will be coming back into Glendale proper?
Well, we actually, if all phases of the realignment and the early release strategies are implemented, we anticipate that our resident parolee population in the city of Glendale will as much as triple. But we know that at least in the very early stages, within the first 18 months of the implementation of these programs, we can expect 24,000 early release felons to come back to LA County proper. And that will certainly tax our resources and efforts.
And a great majority of those commit crimes within days, weeks after they're back into the community, right?
I'm sorry?
They go back to their old habits. They go back to committing crimes.
Exactly, and we know that.
And marijuana would be a typical.
Absolutely. Research has clearly established that we can expect a 70% reoffending rate, and we know that in excess of 50% will have substance abuse problems and issues. So it goes hand in hand.
Other questions before I go to the public? Okay, thank you, Chief. My first card is Margaret Hammond, followed by Christine Harmon.
Good evening, Your Honor, members of the council, city staff. My name is Margaret Hammond, and you well know what side I'm on. I and many of my friends that we've talked about this, long-time residents of Glendale, old-time residents, feel we are completely in support of Chief DePompa's status on the marijuana medical establishments to prohibit the long-term establishment of these dispensaries. We prohibit smoking, and why wouldn't we prohibit marijuana? And also, as far as the police are already shorthanded. Do we need them to have any more problems? And I'm going to be bringing up the subject of another subject that DePompa about the parolees later on. But, as far as getting medical cards, anybody can get medical cards. Just take a look at the cards that are given to disabled people. You see young women with 2 and 3 kids, and they have those cards, and they park in where people with disabilities should be parking, and so they can run in the store and be close and blah, blah, blah. And nobody seems to do anything about that. In L.A., they're nailing those people good. And I'm just saying, one of the problems is who's going to find out whether they have a legal card to get the marijuana or not, if they can get them from the doctors or from wherever they get them from. So if we just don't have them, then we don't have to worry about it. We know that they're not going to be another problem in our city. We've got enough problems with illegal actions and so forth without adding to our problems and adding to the police problems when they're, as I say, already shorthanded. Thank you.
Thank you. Christine Harmon's my last card.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, and residents. I am Christine Harmon. I'm a resident in Glendale, and I want to express my concern about the issue of dispensaries in Glendale. Now, it's not about withholding medicine from people who need it. Since marijuana has been legal, one can only assume that people that live in Glendale that have a necessary need for it have been able to obtain it. So that's not the issue. In fact, from Glendale High School to the closest dispensary in Eagle Rock is only 1.25 miles. So let's assume it's not a medical issue. It is about the other issues that affect the community surrounding the dispensaries. And we have seen this over the last number of years, particularly in Los Angeles and other cities. And we see the unintended issues as they have played out the last 15 years. And I don't think Glendale is in a position to take that on and take those issues on. According to the LA Times, Sheriff Baca, Los Angeles Sheriff Baca, had said that the marijuana industry, has been, quote, hijacked by underground, unquote, drug dealers. I don't think that's something we want to invite into Glendale. Los Angeles Police Department has recorded dozens of crimes related to the dispensaries, robberies and burglaries, and an increase in crime rate. Knowingly going into this discussion, I don't think we want to invite those issues. An article put out in March of this year through the USC Annenberg School quotes a lieutenant from the police department saying, quote, "I've never seen a person that actually looked ill going into a dispensary. Healthy-looking younger men and women in their teens and 20s are visiting these dispensaries and buying," unquote. The issue of drugs in kids, we are well aware of this, and it does seem to be a concern that it is very easy to access marijuana once you're 18. And I don't think that's a message that Glendale wants to send to our kids, that it's just no big deal. But most importantly, knowing these issues are going on and the additional costs in enforcement and the rise in the possibility of crimes in the neighborhoods surrounded by these dispensaries, as we have seen in cities throughout California, and it has been well documented, I think it would be very irresponsible to knowingly allow these businesses to open that will draw additional resources and create additional expenses, or even potentially damage existing businesses that are struggling in Glendale. Okay, and additionally, we have a reputation in Glendale that we have problems with safe driving. Okay. Now, if we allow dispensaries, and while I'm sure everyone will not drive under the influence, I think it can only make it worse. Thank you.
Thank you. I just received another card. Herbert Milano.
Mayor Friedman, members of the City Council, my name is Herbert Milano. I want to address a comment with regard to the police chief. The effect of marijuana use with regard to the situation in Mexico is very dire. The consumption of drugs in the United States is impacting the livelihood of many Mexican cities to a significant detrimental effect. The number of murders in Mexico is probably the highest throughout the world other than in Iraq. So moving along towards a policy that reduces and discourages the consumption of illegal drugs is a good step. What I would like to present to you is a couple of alternative approaches that the city might want to take, or additional approaches to reduce the impact of the early release of prisoners. There are several communities that have used and recommended the use of Dr. Robert Hare's is a psychologist who created the psychopath scale. And when it is applied to certain types of parolees, and those parolees that basically score high on this particular test, and they are retained and not released into the community, the impact on crime is not severe at all. So if the City Council were to look up these particular policies and recommend to a parole board that these tests be applied, any individuals who may be coming back into Glendale, they would not be the most severe and repetitive type offenders. The second thing that the city could do is to encourage and to create a policy to make sure that all the landlords in the city do a criminal records check. If landlords create that type of policy continually, these criminals will not have a place to live. 72% of the population live in multifamily housing. So if we are concerned about keeping the cost of policing down, I think it would behoove the City Council to create a policy to encourage all the landlords to execute a very careful and thorough criminal records check. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Comments from council?
Just so we're clear, we currently have the moratorium. It can go for 1 year maximum. Is that right? Or
we adopted an ordinance in 2009, which we extended again, and the total time period of the moratorium will be 2 years in September this year, and it can't go any longer than that. That's why we're seeking direction to start the process for the code amendments.
Okay. Well, I'm against. I'll just come right out. I'm against the dispensaries in Glendale. I wish we could go outside our borders and create a buffer zone as well, because I think the proximity to some of the other neighborhoods is also having an effect on our community. It is very easy to get a doctor's recommendation, and these drugs are bought, they're resold, they're brought into our schools, and it's something we don't need to encourage. So my direction would be to go full force in creating these codes which would prohibit any sort of retail dispensary.
Mr. Quintero.
Okay, I support ban on the dispensaries. I don't think the law is settled. There's obviously still cases pending in the state, and I assume at the federal level, too. Is that correct?
There have been federal cases as well. I think the main source of the litigation is state law, whether the Compassionate Use Act preempts any local, and the cities have been winning those cases of late.
I mean, it hasn't worked out. The law was passed in 96, I see. There are multiple dispensaries, as one of the speakers mentioned, in Eagle Rock, Tahunga, et cetera, so anyone that needs the marijuana can get it. But let me say this, there is no question that people who have cancer, including undergoing chemotherapy, AIDS, chronic pain, glaucoma, arthritis, do benefit by using marijuana. There's no question about that. Unfortunately, it is just like some of the speakers mentioned, and what we all know from the TV programs, that people basically go see a doctor for X amount of money or issue a chit, well, it would be a prescription, I suppose, or issued a prescription and then buy the marijuana. But there's no question in my mind that it does help those people who are truly ill.
Mr. Weaver?
This is a no-brainer. I'm ready to vote.
Okay, I agree with my colleagues. I think if the people of California had a crystal ball to see how this law was going to be implemented, they wouldn't have voted for it. People did want to allow the compassionate use of this drug to people who truly could benefit from it, as Mr. Quintero said. And in my mind, when someone's really suffering, even if there's no proof that they can benefit, I would give them anything to help relieve their suffering, even if it's only in their mind. But unfortunately, that's not how this is working out. It's working out that pretty much anybody's getting the drug. It is being resold. What really concerns me is that we don't really have a breathalyzer type test for marijuana when people get pulled over, even if they're smoking pot in their car. If they have that card, it's my understanding that they can't be arrested, they can't do anything. They can let them drive away, even if they're smashed, which is really not right and really not safe. And we've all seen, even cities that jumped right on board with the dispensary bandwagon are now backtracking and trying to find a way to either ban or more highly regulate the dispensaries because they've become a real nuisance in a lot of the areas that they're in. Also, those people that are really sick can still get the drug because it is so easily accessible in Atwater, in the unincorporated part of Los Angeles, in Tahunga. So I will certainly support the ban. If somebody would like to make a motion.
Yes, I'll move 8B1.
Second?
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Can we have a roll call?
Council members Manukian, Najarian.
Yes.
Taro.
Yes.
Weaver.
Aye.
Mayor Friedman.
Yes.
We're actually directing the staff to come back with an ordinance.
Right.
That's
Still up to
correct. The amendments have to go to the Planning Commission and then come back to the Council for approval.
Thank you. Next item, please.
Under hearings, 9A is Director of Administrative Services Finance regarding proposed budget of the City of Glendale for fiscal year 2011-2012.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
I'd like to clarify, this is only for us to take public input in this hearing and no action taken.
That's right. We're not taking a vote tonight.
Correct. Madam Mayor, if I may, you've had 12 budget study sessions thus
Only?
far.
How many hours has that been? Has anybody been keeping track?
Yes, almost 60 hours. It's actually been 57 hours of budget study sessions. And
Not that we're counting.
yeah. We tabulated all the numbers last week out of curiosity to see how many hours we've spent, and it's about 57 hours, including Monday's meeting on the wrap-up of some of the general fund and the transportation fund.
It's been kind of a bonding experience.
It has. It absolutely has. But we are glad that it's nearing a close, at least for this year, just to prepare us to start the process for the following year. Before you, as Mr. Weaver said, we have the public hearing for the 2011-2012 budget for the City of Glendale. And as I'm speaking, Our finance director, Bob Elliott, is getting himself situated to take you through a number of slides that will basically be a recap of some of the discussions you've had and your ability to hear from the public, and if there are any adjustments that need to be made, we will do so in preparation for adoption of the budget next week, Tuesday evening.
Madam Mayor, could I just say one thing? All I just think we were kind of joking or laughing up here. This was extremely difficult, time-consuming, and very hard. When you're trying to eliminate $18 million, we took this very seriously. So don't take it the wrong way with what we've started out with, laughing the number of hours we put in. It's very, very difficult. My 15 years, I've never had to go through anything like this.
Are you saying it wasn't a bonding experience for you?
Well, in a way, it was a bonding experience. If we're going to do more bonds tonight, I'll be surprised.
Maybe we should reenact one of our fights so people get a flavor.
You want to start with yesterday?
I've had it with you, Weaver.
I'm not going to vote on the budget.
After the hearing.
There were really only one fight. That's what's healthy disagreement.
Give or take. I'm going to open the hearing.
Okay, let's open the public hearing and we'll go to Mr. Elliott.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, it's a pleasure to finally present the 2011-12 budget hearing. Before you, I'll go through a series of slides, kind of recap our process. We started the budget process way back in January when staff got together for our initial kickoff with all the folks in all the different departments. Prior to that, my staff was working on the cost allocation plan and working with the ISD department on our rates and development of those. In March, we kicked it off with the general fund program review, and we'll get into that a little bit more later on how we took a program prioritization approach this year. And then when we got into April, we did our study sessions. As Ms. Beers said, we had 12 study sessions all the way through yesterday, and then again the hearing tonight and adoption next week. Some of the challenges we have discussed numerous times internally for the executive staff and members of all the different departments, budget liaisons, which I owe a great deal of thanks to, including my staff, for all the many late nights that we put in this year. We did a program prioritization of the budget this year for the general fund in lieu of just doing straight cuts, and that was very difficult. Pulling the numbers out, putting them into distinct programs, prioritizing them as essential, priority, and discretionary, and then presenting them to you as what our offering is in terms of the general fund as a whole. We went through in the initial study sessions all our revenues. While they remain fairly flat, there's a few areas of hope in terms of sales tax going up, but it's primarily a flat picture on our revenues. As we discussed at length, the PERS contributions are going up. It's considerable, as there is a 2-year lag in the recovery from the enormous PERS loss of a few years ago. Our rates are going from approximately 11% to 15% from miscellaneous and 25 to 30% for safety next year. Additionally, medical costs and all our other benefit costs, which we went into great detail on. Medical costs went up on an average rate of about 9%. All our other benefit rates, including insurance, workers' comp, those go into our internal service funds, which we spent quite a deal of time on, as those funds had some deficits from increased expenses. We still have, as I alluded to, a fairly flat recovery or a continued recession, however you look at it, depending on the economist you listen to. And then we have the dark horse is the state of California. We're still not sure what they're going to do. There's a very dark cloud over the potential elimination of redevelopment, and the impact of that could be enormous to the city. Part of the strategies, again, was continuing our long-term cost reductions. Employee concessions. We're engaged with various employee groups currently seeking concessions in their various contracts. We did the same last year. We've restructured a lot of the departments to make them more efficient, downsized actually with the creation of the Community Development Department. We've implemented second-tier retirements for all but the GPOA. We are looking to additional privatization and opportunities to lower our costs where we can in contracting out. And we have continued to do our cooperative efforts with other agencies, primarily the cities of Burbank and Pasadena, in looking at joint services where we can combine our efforts and lower our costs. And lastly, a big effort that's never been done in the city of Glendale, and we spent a lot of time and a whole entire session on it, was a citywide user fee study. That was a many month process where we coordinated with all the departments and hired Will Dan as a consultant to come in and look at our costs, where we can support what our true costs are for each fee. Not necessarily that we would charge them, but at least identify those so we have the potential of cost recovery, but allow us to charge what we can and be in compliance with Prop 218. So overall, the consolidated budget, as you can see, proposed tonight is $852 million of all the different funds. The general fund there is highlighted at $170,226,000. It's roughly a reduction of $2.8 million from last year. We've gone through the detail of that, as well as all the different fund types: special revenues, debt service, capital improvements, enterprise, and internal service funds. And I'll go into a little bit more detail on those in a moment. Again, just to go through the general fund, where we started out several months ago, is the $167 million in resources and $175 million in appropriations. To those, we did all the various adjustments that we did on the revenue side and as well as on the appropriation side. Of note, on the resources side is the loss of the transfers, primarily the transfer from the water fund at $4.1 million, and reductions in the transfers from the fleet and ISD funds. We built those into the rates this year, so that was the primary reductions. Structural change this year: we pulled out the Glendale Youth Alliance. We put them in a special fund. We discussed that. On the appropriations side, we had various cost reductions with salaries. That's primarily the GCA contract. Our benefit increases with the different internal service fund increases, the increases in our PERS, and then reductions in our various M&O capital outlay got us to our initial estimate of $162 million on revenues and $180 million on appropriations, and that was the $18 million gap that we had to address. So the strategies we employed and brought to you and went through in detail. We proposed an increase in the electric transfer. Again, that was partially offset by the reduction in the water transfer to the general fund. We had an increase in the GRA loan repayment, and to make note of that, we have in previous shown that as $3 million. It's actually 2.9 because of the actual increase. We had rounded it to 6 overall. Fee increases we estimated at $1.3 million. That's a product of the fee study that we went through. We've got an estimate of $250,000 in there for security of water assets. We talked about that. That's basically recouping some of the costs for our safety services for the water and electric utility assets. We haven't quite developed those yet, but we are working on those. We've added back $1 million from the transfer, the closure of the police augmentation fund, back into the general fund this year. That was about $3 million. We proposed using $1 million of that next year as a resource, and that gave us a total of $170 million in resources. Starting at the $180 million for appropriation estimates, we've added in the $1.5 million transfer back to the CIP. That's the half of the $3 million increase of the GRA loan repayment that we're going to put back to the CIP to help fund the CIP. We have reductions in transfers. $500,000 of that is from the paramedic fund. We've reduced that, the typical transfer from the general fund to the paramedic fund. We suspended the nutritional meals. That was $137,000, and chose to use up some of the fund balance in that fund. We've eliminated the federal lobbyist at a cost of $108,000. We reduced the hardware and software budgets of the various general fund departments. And then we had program reductions of $4.7 million and other estimated savings of $6.4, and I'll go into those in detail. Adjustments we made yesterday. The report was written based off the numbers that I had in the previous slide at the $170,226,000. We made some adjustments yesterday with adding back the potential revenue for the Rose Float and adding in the cost of the Rose Float contract. We added back the 3 different police programs for the $42,000 and the additional library funding, and that reduced all our potential savings, but still gives us a balanced budget of $170,276,000 in the general fund. Going back to the specific proposed program reductions, there's a list by department. Obviously, through the prioritization process, the largest department reduction was Community Services and Parks, and we spent a lot of time on those various programs. Paramedics have the program reductions and the BLS restructuring that's been discussed at length, and the various other programs that have been reduced in detail. Other cost reductions, as we've discussed, we've had we're assuming a $3 million savings for the remaining vacancies within the general fund. We have plugged in $3 million in employee concessions. We're still negotiating with all the bargaining groups. We hope to obtain at least $3 million. Reductions in contractual services. Again, we sent out letters to all our vendors asking them for reductions. We've had a fair response, but we think we'll get at least $200,000 to $300,000 there, or at least $300,000. We've put in $200,000 for outsourcing and consolidation. We've got a lot of potential items there, and we're pretty confident we can get those. We transitioned City Views to an electronic medium, saving costs there. And again, the Tri-City cost reduction efforts of $100,000. Some of the other reductions, or the $318,000, was a lot of the other roundings and adjustments that we made, so it gets us to the $6.4 million in the proposed estimated savings. So moving on into the other funds, I just wanted to highlight some of the details that's included in the attachment to your staff report. In addition to the proposed budget, which we've distributed, as well as the proposed fee schedule, were all attachments to the staff report. The fund detail is listed, but I wanted to highlight some of the changes or increases in the different fund types. Within the special revenue funds, we have the Housing Assistance Fund had an increase of about $3.6 million for increases in housing vouchers. The redevelopment fund, Fund 240, had increases in appropriations for some of the projects. That was approximately $11 million. And Measure R, or Fund 254, had about a $5 million increase. And that's some of the increases in the special revenue funds. In debt service funds, those are funds that are used to pay for accumulate the resources to pay our debts. We issued a new bond this year. So that's primarily the increase of about $4.2 million was the new 2011 taxable tax allocation bond that was issued for the redevelopment agency. Capital improvement, we did a presentation on capital improvement. The primary capital improvements for general fund are 401. It's funds 401, which is the general fund CIP, and 402, which is the gas tax. Some of the changes there, about a $3.8 million increase in the gas tax fund. And the total appropriation in the general fund CIP was about $6.8 million. And we went through those in detail. Some of the changes in the enterprise funds, there's a large appropriation for the Chevy Chase Sewer Diversion Project. That's about a $12 million project. The electric fund had reduced appropriations of about $14.5 million, and the water funds had an increase in appropriation of about $2.8 million, just to highlight some of those increases. Internal service funds, again, those are the various funds that we use to serve ourselves in inside the city. Those are our insurance funds, our technology funds, our benefit funds. We went through the various increases in those. To highlight some of those were the insurance funds had a $1.2 million increase. Medical fund was about $1.8 million. Employee benefits about $1.1 million, and the RHSP was about $1.2 million. Again, those are internal rates that we charge ourselves to fund those various funds. And again, just to recap, your total budget in all the various forms is $852 million. I'm presented on a pie chart so you can see the proportions. The enterprise funds in the lower half are approximately half of the entire budget. The general fund is $170 million, and then the other fund types in the other slices of the pie. One last thing was just a recap of the reductions. We had a reduction of 31.3 FTE salaried positions within the budget. 9 of those will result in layoffs, 2 retirements. 14 of those were vacant positions, and then 6.3 positions we'll charge out to other or move the cost to other funds or will be absorbed within departments, and those are the point 1, point 2s of the various reductions that we made. There was also a reduction in 10.4 hourly positions, and that gets us to the 41.6, I believe, reductions that we had gone through with you. One of the things that staff has recommended, and we'll bring back to you next week in a report, is offering a severance package to the laid off, 9 folks that are being laid off, 1 month's salary and 1 month's worth of medical insurance. And if you have any questions on that particular one, we can answer questions on that. We haven't talked about that in the past.
Actually, I have a question on the 9 layoffs.
Yes.
What departments are they coming from?
There is 1 in finance, 1 in community development, 4 in community services and parks, 1 in management services, and 1 in public works.
The community services and parks, can you give me more detail on the 4? Are they people working cleaning parks or services people?
Why don't we ask Jess Duran, Director of Community Services and Parks, to come up and answer those questions.
Thank you, Mayor Friedman, council members, Councilmember Quintero. Our full-time salaried positions are all filled positions and include a senior park naturalist, a park naturalist as part of the open space and trails reduction. It includes 1 full-time salaried laborer position, and it includes 1 full-time salaried community services specialist and 1 full-time salaried community services supervisor. The position primarily in charge of the Rose Float and the Leisure Guide, among other things.
Thank you.
Questions? I have 2 comments before I go to the public.
Oh, one more slide.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Question and answer.
I saw this. Okay.
So to conclude, that presents your 2011-12 balanced budget. Essential city services were not impacted. We continue to have ongoing challenges with the state and potential takeaway of the redevelopment. And with that, staff recommends that you have the public hearing and direct us to make any changes.
Okay. So before I go to the public, I'm going to make 2 comments. One of these, I think my colleagues are going to throw things at me. But there were a lot of programs that we talked about, and one program that we talked about early on, I thought the direction to staff was to find a way of maintaining this particular program. But I've since learned that it wasn't translated that way. So I want to let the staff know that I would still like to find a way to fund this particular program because I think it's very valuable and it's not a huge amount of money. That's the good news. And that's the Montrose Christmas Parade. We're going to cancel a lot of things this year. I don't want to be the one that cancels Christmas. That parade gets tens of thousands of people to Montrose. It's their one big main event. It's a source of tremendous pride to this community. And I am unclear as to exactly what they would need to operate. I'm told that if we cut all of the funding, that they won't be able to operate the parade at all. I think that there's some middle ground between what we've given in the past and some relief we can give them now. So I'd like to see us have that conversation. Mr. Quintero?
Yeah, I didn't know either. That one wasn't exactly broadcast. I feel the same way.
You don't want to cancel Christmas?
It's $10,000 for the Montrose Christmas Parade in terms of an actual monetary donation to the Montrose Christmas Parade committee. But if I can also add to that, there's in-kind donations that the City of Glendale also provides the committee. We have cleanup issues in terms of street sweepers and barricades, and that's a $5,000 approximate cost for Public Works. The police department provides officers and the helicopter for the Montrose Christmas Parade, and that's a cost of about $25,000, as well as GTV6, anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000 for filming the event and televising. And so it's a total of about $40,000, $45,000, inclusive of the $10,000 actually monetary donation that we make to the committee.
Well, I think we need to sit down with them and see what they can live without. If they can do without the helicopter, that's a big chunk of money. I think they understand the situation that we're in. I'm sure that they'll work with us and be, very reasonable, because there's going to be a threshold where we're not going to be able to do it. But I think you're hearing a sentiment up here, at least from two of us. I haven't asked the rest of my colleagues, that we certainly don't want this to be the end of the Montrose Christmas Parade. Mr. Quintero.
Yeah, and then we can also, I do agree in terms of the 25 for police, that maybe just eliminating the helicopter alone is going to help. But in addition to that, the Shopping Park Association, I understand, is making a few bucks that they weren't making in the past, so maybe we can work with them. Maybe they're willing to contribute.
Right. So we'll continue that conversation, but I'd like for now to not remove that item from the budget. Let's continue that.
Grabbing that back in.
And then the second, yes?
I ask, is cruise night still in?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, Chris.
And then the second item, and this is an item from the fee schedule, something that I've had conversations with Mr. Hagani since the fee schedule was introduced, and something that I'm uncomfortable about, is the DRB fee increase, but only for low-budget projects. Now, we don't get a lot of projects that are low-budget projects that have to go to design review. Usually they're substantial projects where that fee is not going to be a huge impact, but there are some projects that are not exempted. Most of the low-budget projects are exempted from design review, and the staff can sign off on those changes over the counter, and so they avoid that fee. But there are a few types of projects that they're not able to exempt. For instance, a lot of the deck additions. And those are projects that may be, at fairly reasonable cost to the homeowner. They could be a $15,000 deck, let's say, to then make them pay a fee that's going to be equivalent to, 15% or 10% of their budget, I think is unreasonable. So I would like to look at some sort of a system where if we have a project that's under a certain dollar amount, and I don't know what that is, if it's $20,000 or $15,000, it's a lower fee. And perhaps the flip side is that on very large projects that take a lot of staff time, we can increase the fee to make up for that difference. Multi-family, large, skyscrapers, that type of project. Mr. Hagani?
If I may, Madam Mayor, since you and I had the conversation, I'd spoken with the planning staff, and we actually have already embedded into the proposed fees a fee that the projects that take most of the staff time will actually pay proportionally more. But to address the issue that you raised, if the council so desires, we can add an item to the number of the fees that the planning division charges, that all projects which require design review board approval under sections 30.47.020 F5 or F6. These are the areas where the projects that would otherwise be exempted, but because of some clause in the code, we still have to take them to the design review board. That actually addresses the smaller projects that you are concerned about, and for those we would maintain the current fee for design review board review, and we would not increase them. So the projects that fall into those sections. If the council wishes, we could add this to the proposed ordinance, and that'll be a minor amendment.
I agree. That's the only thing that makes sense. We don't want to we want to encourage people to work with the city, get the permits, go to the DRB if required, and so forth. So no, I agree with that.
What is that fee, Mr. Hagani?
It's just a little bit over $700 currently, so it's the existing design review board review fee. which is...
I mean, if we want to encourage people to do it the right way, maybe we should talk about lowering that fee.
I think can we look at it according to budget? Because if, I don't exactly know what budgets we're talking about for these particular projects, because I know the ones that are very small do get exempted from design review.
The issue with valuation is that not everything is subject to building and safety permits, which is where the valuation is determined, and some of them are actually, they just come to planning. So for those, the $700 fee is small. And to address Mr. Najarian's point, we encourage people to go for the exemption, and we actually direct them, give them options that if they follow, they can be exempted, which is just a little bit over $100 for an exemption. So that's the best incentive to avoid the fees.
So they have a choice, in other words. Does that satisfy your concern, Mr. Najarian?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. I'm sort of flying by the seat of my pants at this point. I wasn't really prepared to talk about DRB fee discussion and exempt projects. So
we're not going to decide tonight. They're going to bring this back as an amendment, is my understanding. So we'll have time to see a full report.
As long as we have time to review it, and I can review the material and the schedules, I'm fine with that.
If I may, Madam Mayor, this exactly what was presented to you by Wildan and staff at the day that you had the study session is exactly what's in the ordinance. The only thing we're proposing to change is to add this one category for the smaller projects where the existing fee would remain, which is what this is.
Instead of raising it.
Instead of raising it. So we're not adding any more discussions. We actually had those discussions at the study session.
Okay. So I don't think there's enough projects that fall under this to where it's going to impact your budget, but I just want to make sure that those smaller projects don't get slammed with a big fee. We should at least maintain the current fee, and knowing that they can usually get exemptions if they choose that option is also good.
And so just to follow up then on the first point, as far as the Montrose Christmas Parade, in our budget then we're loading the full $45,000 or $65,000. Is that the price?
We have the $10,000. Within
That's
the community
the direct
services.
monetary.
That's a direct monetary cost, and that was part of our reduction. The other costs associated with the Montrose Christmas Parade are embedded within the different departments.
Okay, so it's only that $10,000 that's
Correct.
at play.
Yes.
And we'll make the necessary adjustment to bring it back for adoption next week.
Okay. And so meanwhile, somebody from staff needs to sit down with the Montrose, whatever group wants to sit down with us and talk about how to bring this in at a lower budget this year. Okay. Thank you. Any other comments before I go to the public? Okay. My first card is Steve Pierce, followed by Herbert Milano.
Mayor Friedman, council members, and staff, I'm Steve Pierce, and I'm actually the parade coordinator for the Montrose Christmas Parade. And so it's very timely. Thank you very much for bringing that back to the table. I am available 24/7 for the next week before you make your decision. But I was prepared to come up here and talk about the emotions of the parade and what it brings to the community and what it's all about. We have hundreds of people that contact us every year and say, I remember that parade from 25 years ago. I was in that parade. Our parade entrance, 90% of it is children and youth. So it's all about the community. It's what makes a community strong. It's what we all think about when we think about a great community. So thank you again for bringing that back to the table. I did send a letter to Parks, and also I believe I sent an email to Mayor Friedman regarding some of the areas we could cut. Certainly, we have already made arrangements for a private helicopter to take Santa over the parade, so we can cut that out. We have made arrangements with DVDing the parade and actually doing the video for the parade with a private concern, so we can cut out all of the GT6 and just provide a DVD to GT6 if they want to show it. There's other areas that we have already made arrangements to make some cuts on. I think one of the key areas for us is the $10,000 that Yasmin was mentioning. That is very key to us because that amounts to about 40% of our actual checks that we write. And we do get support and donations from many community members, but it's tough, especially during this time of with the economy. So consideration for that would be key for us. But certainly there are other areas that we can cut back that without affecting our parade. And so we thank you very much. And I am available, so just give me a call. Okay? Any questions at all? Or
Would it help to cut out the part where the council members ride in the old cars?
I was even
Save
thinking
on
of
the
making the mayor and the city council our grand marshals this year. So, no, we have to have that. That's important to all of us up there in the community, and also for the city of Glendale. That's very important. So we're not going to cut that out. But we may, and in all seriousness, we may make some changes to the VIP reception, and there's some things we can cut back on that. There's not very many frills, but there certainly are some things that we can cut back during the budget considerations, and we are doing that.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Herbert Milano, followed by Jordan Harriman.
Thank you very much, Mayor Friedman. Members of the City Council and staff, my name is Herbert Milano. A large number of hours during the budget study sessions dealt with how to cut $18 million, and many of the discussions dealt with how to reduce services to seniors, reducing services to youth, increasing fees with nearly all of the city services in parks, libraries, building and safety, utilities, bus riders, and also balancing the budget by laying off hourly workers and the rank and file. It is my contention that none of these increases in fees and reductions of services would have been required had the City Council in years past been prudent with its negotiations with fire, police, and managers as it pertains to salaries, pensions, and benefits. Here is a review of the past 10 years. Glendale salaries and wages taken from the annual Form W3 and the CAFR from 2000 through 2010. Next slide, please. This is a depiction of the salaries and wages and deferred salaries since the year 2000. Even though they have stabilized in the past 3 years, we have an additional problem of the benefits increasing exponentially. Next slide. Inflation rate during 10 years, 27%, no population increase, payroll increase by 61%, pensions by 300%, medical insurance expenditures 500%. Next slide. Mid-management employment from 1999 through 2008, 40% increase. Next slide. Police officers, sworn police officers in 2000 to 28, in 2010 to 56, we had a 12% increase in police up to last year. Next slide. Public safety costs, though, increased tremendously by 137%. And that is basically where you have the problem. The problem is that the city needs to really implement significant pension reforms, because we have a situation where fire and police personnel, when they retire, can get up to 90% of the last highest salary. And because they can retire earlier, the burden on the post-employment benefit for health is astronomical. We need to move from a defined benefit to a defined contribution plan. Is the only way that in the long haul this budget could be saved. And I have as an ending a resolution for the Rose Float situation. If every permanent salaried employee donated $26, we would have the $50,000 we need for the Rose Float. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Jordan Harriman, followed by Ross Paulson.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council. My name is Jordan Harriman. I'm a resident of Glendale, and I'm the president of Jewel City JWV Little League. I'm here to speak about the proposed user fee by Community Services and Parks. It's called an approved community youth group field light fee of $5 per participant. Jewel City JWV is the oldest chartered Little League in California. For nearly 60 years, it has provided baseball training and enjoyment for the children of Glendale. Never before has the city asked Jewel City, JWV, to implement a user fee. We certainly recognize how tough times are, how much time you've spent on this budget, the cuts you've had to make. But it was very telling that the invocation was about youth. Part of the invocation was that the youth that are coming of age now train the youth that come after. Winston Churchill said, "There is no finer investment for a community than putting milk into babies." What he meant was that you have to nourish the youth. One of the best ways to nourish youth is through sports programs, both soccer and baseball, all the sports that we provide. Glendale doesn't have a municipal sports program. It's provided by the private volunteer organizations like Jewel City, Crescenta Valley, Foothill, Vaquero, and AYSO. It was disappointing to me personally that Community Services and Parks took such a hit in the budget, lost employees, lost a significant amount of their budget, and that they were asked to have to come up with a way to support and justify expenditures. Everything they've ever done for us has been tremendous. They've already lost staff and budget in prior years, and yet they're like MacGyvers sometimes. They make everything happen with less and less and always make it a good experience for our leagues. We really appreciate the work they do. One of the problems, though, with this fee is that you're looking at the use of lights for sports events as a cost when it's a benefit for the city. Last night we had games at Babe Herman, baseball games. There were at least 300 or 400 people there, all cheering, all out in the open air, children enjoying themselves, the thrill of competition. And after the game, little kids who are not yet in our league just ran out on the field and started playing baseball. As many different speakers have talked about tonight, the real purpose of a city is to support and nourish its youth. And that's what our baseball leagues do and our sports leagues. A user fee is a tax, and a tax is like a cavity. It never gets smaller and it never goes away. This would be the first tax imposed on our youth leagues, but I fear it wouldn't be the last. The city has been through many tough times in the past 50, 60 years that we've been in existence, yet it has never felt the need to impose this sort of fee. We ask that it not impose the fee this time either. I believe there are other ways to make up this revenue other than putting the burden on the youth. Finally, the way the fee is proposed, it's a fee per participant. We have 300 kids, but less than half of those actually use the parks at night. Our T-ball, coach pitch, and most importantly, our Challenger division, which is mentally and physically disabled children, don't use the fields at night. I don't think the city of Glendale wants to be the city that imposes fees on challenged youth for using sunshine. Thank you.
Thank you. Ross Paulson, followed by Stu Meyer.
Good evening, Mayor Friedman and council members Weaver, Najarian, and Quintero, and staff members. My name is Ross Paulson. I'm with AYSO. I'm the Assistant Regional Commissioner there. It's very nice to see you all again. I have with me fellow board members Scott Nord and Craig Duncan, and they are both board members, coaches, referees, volunteers. They do all kinds of things, all-star coordinator, you name it. So I just heard Mr. Harriman, who was quite eloquent here with regard to the $5 per child user fee that's being imposed. I definitely agree with everything he said, and I don't want to repeat things that he said. I would tell you a couple of things about what we do. We have to practice at night. During the week after school, we have about 3,500 to 3,700 kids in the program. Last year we had 3,700. We expect to have the same number this year. We also have a VIP program for special needs kids. Since he mentioned that, I'll mention ours. We have about 50 kids, and they practice at night. I think that the this is quite burdensome on the kids. We charge a very minimal amount to play. It's a $90 per year fee, so this $5 is about 6 or 7% of the registration fee for a kid. For the VIP program, there's a $50 charge that we have for them. But I'm just saying that this is a burden. We aren't in favor of this proposed fee, and if the council could see their way clear to have this fee not imposed, that would be in the best interest of the kids that are in the program, I think.
Thank
Do you
you.
have any questions or anything?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stu Meyer, followed by Steve Norens.
Mayor Friedman, City Council. So my name is Stu Meyer, and I'm the president of our CV Little League. And also I'm here to speak about the proposed use fee for the lights. Like my fellow colleagues have mentioned, in our league, we're a league of about 400 families. And even today, we struggle to keep our fees down. So today, the average fee is about $185 per kid. And even with that, we go out to the community and we raise almost $17,000 in getting sponsors. So some of the kids play for Billy's Board Shop or a particular construction company. We also run fundraisers. That this year we collected over $7,000 in fundraisers. And I bring this up because I want you to know that even with all this, we run in the red, and we don't pay everybody as quick as we can, and it becomes a very big burden for us. And this year, in fact, 40 kids, or almost $10,000 in fees, were uncollectible just because the parents couldn't pay it, right? And we're not the league that says, I'm sorry, little Johnny, you can't play because your parents don't have the $185. We're going to let them play, and we're going to somehow come up with that money. So I know the fee sounds small at $5, but in the big picture, that's an extra $3,000 or so that we would have to pay. And I do want to point out that our league is broken into, we have a 5-6-year-old league, right? We have a 7-8 for both boys and girls. And these kids, they don't play at night ever, right? That's practically half our league. They don't play at night. They play during the day. And it seems as that they're going to pay taxes eventually or fees, and I don't really want to be known as the guy who has to, put a fee on a 5-year-old to play baseball or have to deny some of these kids to play baseball. So our fees overall are going up. The umpires, they want an extra $5 because gas is $4 a gallon now, and we only pay these kids $35 for a 2-hour umpiring session, and they probably pay $10 for gas just to get there. So they're doing this at their will, and so we're getting increases in there. We get increases in equipment fees because we won't let the kids go out there in shoddy uniforms and unprotected catcher's gear. So we change our equipment every 2 years, and we don't like to compromise on that as well. We, of course, have higher insurance fees and higher district fees. So our fees are kind of coming from everywhere, and before you turn around, it's going to be $200 for a kid to play baseball. And you have 2 kids, that's $400. It becomes a big burden for the community. And what we really believe in our league, and I'll quote John Wooden on this because I'm such a believer, is that we really emphasize have fun and play with your friends. And that's what we're about. We're about building the strong communities, strong kids, strong families. And I'll conclude just by telling you that Saturday night we had our closing ceremonies, and like every year, we give a couple scholarships. And these are scholarships to kids that have gone through the whole program. And this year, we gave a scholarship to one of our players that is going to Stanford and one that's going to San Diego State. So I know we're building strong kids. Again, I'd hate to have to deny kids to play because their parents can't afford it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is it Steve Norfus? They've said it? Okay. We'll put you down as agreeing with the other speakers. My last card is Mike Mohill.
Thank you, Mayor Friedman. Council members, I guess you saved the best for last, because the reality is, ladies and gentlemen in the audience and at home, the reason we have this horrible budget is because 4 of the council members in this room received thousands of dollars from the unions. Mr. Weaver received $11,000 in total from the Political Action Committee of the Police Department. Councilman Quintero received $15,000 in 2009, and so did Mr. Nigerian, and Mrs. Friedman, I believe, was $3,000. And when you receive this kind of money from the unions, it's called pay to play. And tonight, the citizens of Glendale are getting the brunt of your horrible financing. Mr. Milano gave us a beautiful PowerPoint presentation this evening showing the public where the money has gone. It hasn't gone to me. You see, my wallet is empty like everybody else. I'm tired of footing the bills for the city employees. The first responsibility of this government is the pension that you've already given to all the city employees. The former assistant city manager received a pension for life at about age 60 for over $164,000 per year for life. And the average person today is between 15 and 25 years beyond the pension day for those who live and work for the city of Glendale. It's pensions. And the second obligation of this government are the salaries to the city employees. According to the Glendale News Press, there were 2,400 employees for the city of Glendale, of which 30% of those employees received a salary of over $100,000 each. I said it, folks, $100,000 each. And the people who are paying these bills are people like myself on Social Security. The stakeholders are getting it, you know where it is, right in the wallet. And these adjustments the City Council has made with the unions, the two-tier system, the give back, they haven't done any hard bargaining, folks in the back room here. They just kicked the can down the road. Ask the City Council and their union supporters to kick in to all your programs that have been cut, okay? That have been cut so that you can play football, you can play soccer, you can play all the sports, because you 5 people are responsible for it. And with that, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Weaver?
I'd like to ask Ms. Beer, would you explain to the public the fee structure? It's going to be separate. We'll have hearings, will we, on the fee structure?
Mr. Weaver, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council, Mr. Weaver, for the fee studies, as it was indicated by Hassan Haghani a little earlier, we had a couple of study sessions on the fee studies themselves. And what we're hoping for is, as a part of this budget adoption, which would be next Tuesday, the fee schedule would be adopted along with the citywide budget.
I thought we were going to have something separate.
There were a couple of items that you had asked us to remove during the study sessions that we had. Those couple of items will be brought back to you, but the majority of the fee study that we covered with you at a study session previously will be...
That was it.
That was it, and we were hoping that we received our feedback from you at that time.
Except the problem is that fee structure study was presented during a budget study session during the day.
Correct.
Not in the evening hours when people who work could come.
Well,
I don't know how that works in.
They're here now, and the information's been available online.
I know, but I'm just trying to be reasonable. How much detail are we going to go into all the fee structure again to start adjusting and analyzing the impacts on the city budget?
Well, we have currently, as one of the budget strategies, $1.3 million in increases for the fees.
Understood.
And as Mr. Elliott stated earlier, this is the first time really that we've done a comprehensive study of all of our fees citywide. And there is also an attachment, once again, and it would be a third time, with today's budget agenda item, where all the fees are mentioned as part of this budget hearing. And, if you have any questions regarding specific fees, we have Armin Hartkalian here who can answer some questions. All the department heads are here who can also answer questions. If you have specific questions regarding the community services and parks $5 increase, we have some information on that if you'd like to hear that at this time. Whatever the pleasure of the council is at this time.
I was at a doctor's appointment, so I missed that particular budget session, although I did see it on DVD. Let me ask, the $5 per participant, that is specifically to pay for the electrical?
Correct. I'll ask Jess Duran to come up, and as he's coming up, what I understand is the utility costs for the lighting is about $40,000, and the $5 per participant fee would really cover half of that for us, which would be $20,000. So it would really recoup the $20,000 instead of the $40,000, and it would be a direct.
In addition to this particular fee, what does AYSO and Little League and so forth, what do they pay in terms of fees for rental, for the fields, et cetera?
Mayor Friedman, members of the City Council, and Councilman Quintero, currently, other than the sports complex, the leagues during season do not pay any fees for any of the use of the ball fields. So this would be a new fee that we would charge for in-season use of the ball fields. Now, for out-of-season use, they do pay fees. So this would be during their season when we currently don't charge fees. We're proposing or recommending to charge $5 per participant. So this is a brand new fee, and it was part of the user fee cost study exercise where the goal was to try to look at areas where you can begin to recover some of your costs. And the easiest cost recovery analysis that we could do at that time, in the short period of time we had, was to look at our utility costs and how we might be able to begin to recover that. So this recommendation is based on trying to recover at least half of that cost. And that dollar amount is $20,000.
Okay, so the total fee at $5 a participant comes to approximately $20,000.
Correct.
For AYSO, the Little Leagues, whatever other.
So if your team is comprised of 15 players, it's $75 multiplied by the number of teams that use our fields on an annual basis.
And this would go to the recreation fund,
Correct.
not the general fund.
Correct.
With regard to that, I've been here several occasions when AYSO has come in with large checks, $50,000 or more, I think, as a voluntary contribution towards field maintenance and field development. How do we deal with that? Should they not get a credit for that?
It's okay with you, Councilman Jaron. I'm going to ask Joanne Vendito if she can answer that question.
I don't remember if that was a one-time deal, but I remember there was a significant check at one point that they brought in.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that. Joanne, are you?
Do I remember that correctly?
Mayor Friedman, council members, and Councilman Najarian. Joanne Vendito, I'm with Community Services and Parks. I'm the acting recreation administrator. There was a one-time fee that AYSO came in with specifically. I would like to tell you what it was for, and I honestly do not remember. It was specifically for, I believe, the synthetic turf at the soccer fields. If I'm not mistaken, I think that was what it was for.
And it was a one-time?
One-time
donation?
only, right. Right.
I mean, not too far back.
Right. Well, the fields were put together 2002, so it would have been in the 2002, 2003, 2004.
No, we inaugurated them in 2005. I was just on
Was it
council.
2005? Oh, no. Yes, you're right. We were putting them together in 2002.
I think they gave us a check for.
Right.
And that's just a one-time fee that they,
Correct.
or donation that they made.
Right. It was one time. They were helping assist with that facility.
And so is that money in a separate fund? Where is that money, or has that been
That's
used?
what's used for that went toward the synthetic turf to put that in and put in the little extras that are needed to make it a field that's well used with the 2 soccer fields at the sports complex.
And to waive that, if that fee were to be waived, that would, in effect, be an additional $40,000 transfer from GWP. Is that how that would be seen as, or Bob?
General fund.
What's that again?
Is that money going to the general fund then, or to GWP?
No, if the fee were to waive, if we were to waive that utility cost, the $40,000,
Recreation fund.
in effect, that would be an additional $40,000 transfer from GWP to the general fund, or to whichever fund.
Well, it would actually
well, no.
be. Go ahead.
Yeah.
How would that be?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, this fee, as recommended, would be deposited into the recreation fund, and it's an enterprise fund, so it's basically fee supported. So whatever charges they have, they would, operate just like the sewer fund and any other enterprise fund. So they would pay their bills full cost, whatever their activities are. So again, it's not the general fund, but it's meant to, that recreation enterprise fund is meant to be self-supporting.
And how is the recreation fund doing? I'm looking in the CAFR.
Just looking, it's okay. It's
Does that include, is this fee also imposed on the adult leagues as well? The adult softball?
The adult softball leagues have, the leagues are run at the sports complex, at Montrose, and at Glorieta. And the league fees take into consideration the utility fees. We build them within. We had a little bit of a fee increase, if I'm not mistaken, with this recommendation. So all those fees are taken into consideration. It's already built into the adult league fees. Right. Any rental fees that are for any of the fields that have to do with adults, that we have built that utility cost in there. Whether it be it's the water and the power. So the water fees have gone up and the electricity has gone up. So those are things that we're charged for in our funds, and so we're trying to recoup that.
Mr. Quintero.
Okay, well, for myself, I'm not prepared to raise these fees. I don't think $20,000 to me just doesn't, it doesn't work. I think $5 a participant, in essence, $5 a kid, and we don't need to do that.
Obviously, I don't think any of us wants to do that. The question is, how do we backfill, and where do we get the funds from, and how do we deal with that? It's it's the Christmas parade here, it's the Rose Float here, it's Star and Pal here, and now it's this. This is adding up to I don't want to say significant money, because in the overall course of our budget, it's not a huge item, but we still need to balance it. I think there's a gentleman who's...
Do you have more information for us, or you...
I have a suggestion, Your Mayor.
Do it quickly.
Yes, it sounds like the night leagues, adult leagues, are being charged for their own use, that this is a burden somebody has to bear. It might be better for the night leagues to bear the burden to help fund the children rather than children pay it. And I want to emphasize that less than half our kids use lights. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just think general fund, 170 million, enterprise funds at 420 million, altogether an $852 million budget, that the staff can find some way to recoup the 20,000. And I don't feel that way about the adult leagues, by the way. Not that I don't think it's important that we have a healthy program for adults, but it's a little different story from families trying to raise kids. I know not all families are hard-pressed to pay that $5, but as a matter of fact, the baseball, they're paying a pretty hefty amount of money. I played Little League, Pony League, and Babe Ruth and so forth. I don't remember if I remember we always had new uniforms. It's funny, when you're a kid, I guess somebody was paying. But anyway, those are fairly healthy amounts of money. And like the speaker said, if you have 2 or 3 kids, all of a sudden it's sort of cost prohibitive. So I just don't want to add to it. I think we can come up with another solution.
And I'd just like to state that we have worked on this budget for a long time. 60 hours, and we have cut as best as we can. We've tried to raise revenues as best that we can. There was one large part of this, our revenue stream, that has been taken out. That was a transfer from the water department. In essence, each and every one of us that has water, buys water from Glendale, was essentially paying a little bit to help fund many of these different programs. We're talking libraries, we're talking Christmas parade, we're talking programs for disadvantaged youth, we're talking about kids that are trying to play ball under the lights. So I think it's fair to return some of the outrage that we got from just one or two members of the community who were outraged that the water-paying ratepayers of the city of Glendale are being overcharged and are being soaked to support parts of the city budget. Well, this is what's left on the table, folks. These small yet very much important parts of the budget that mean so much to the youth, that mean to those folks that are participating in the parade, that need a little bit of help so they don't take a wrong turn in life. This is what's left. So I just want to return some of that outrage for those of you that have been watching and seeing one or two members stomp their hand on the dais and accuse us of being acting unconstitutionally, acting without conscience, acting beyond our scope. Well, this is where that money was going. So if all of you just want to keep that in mind as we're trying to slice this budget down as finely as we can and trying to come up with the most creative ways to fund these important remaining programs, just keep that in mind.
No?
Mr. Weaver, do you have anything to add?
Well, just in general terms, this is my 15th budget. Early ones used to be a lot easier because the city was increasing services to the public. And now we've gone the opposite way in the worst recessionary period since the Great Depression. And there's just no way to satisfy everybody. If everybody had looked at all the fee structure and all the programs, we'd have a lot more people in here fighting for their particular program. Fortunately, the reality is most of the people in the city work for a living, aren't getting online and reading the budget or whatever. Word of mouth, some of them find out, and down here, the sports side of it did their homework or found it and they showed up. I don't know where you stop. You can cut here, and then what do? How do you get back to the balanced budget? It's not easy. Tell you cut the fee there. Okay, what's the impact? Well, the enterprise fund won't be balanced. It'll use some of the reserves. We've gone through that a lot in here too on these enterprise funds. Well, we don't have enough money coming in, so we adjust the structure to try to get them to be self-sufficient. Well, this time now we're talking about maybe letting it unbalance to help the kids. And if that's what my colleagues want, I'm for it. But, there's always going to be something else where people will want an adjustment. And people have to remember that a budget is simply the best estimate of our revenue and expenditures for the year. And if we get within 3-4% of being accurate, we're doing real good. At least that's what I remember in my days on budgets. So we'll arrive at a budget here, and then we'll see what happens with the revenue stream. If we start to climb out of the recession, there's a little more dollars to go around. This is just not set in stone. We're happy you're all here giving your opinions on things. So if my colleagues want to cut fees here or there, I'm sure not going to fight it. Fight against children. My kids all played 4 sports each, so I'm with you, whatever you want to do.
Well, this is the end of 57 hours. Funny, it seemed
right.
like about 67. It seemed like 77 or more. But anyway, this is the final, perhaps last minute, but important nevertheless. I think we just have to, in my opinion, let that 20,000 go and see where we can make it up.
I have an idea, and we had not discussed this, but how about putting some sort of advertising on the actual light standards themselves?
Actually, last year, Dottie Sharkey, who's one of our parks commissioners, had come in with an entire list. She had really gone out and done research about what cities have done to raise money through their sports and park programs. And it was everything from selling advertisements, which I don't believe that we do right now. It was a very long list, and it was never considered by council. None of that revenue ever came back to us for our input. She brought in this great report, she had done the research, and it just died right there. I have already asked. I asked about a month ago when we went into this process for that report to come back to us. And I would like to make sure that that happens. I don't know whether it has to go back to parks. They've already discussed it. As far as I remember, everybody was fine with it. But it never made that next step of coming to us for policy consideration. And this is the time when we really need to start looking at that.
Well, even before Dottie, going back even further, we have presentations. People wanting to put signs on the fences, advertising, and we generate revenue, and nothing ever happened with it.
I don't know how much money can actually be gotten from that. I don't know whether it's, we can go by those numbers because the economy is more difficult, but I assume that I would like staff to take a look and come back to us and say, we believe that realistically we can generate 5,000, 10,000, 20,000, and then let's figure out if that money goes to this group, to any other groups, because I'm not sure that this is the last we're going to hear about fees. I think as other groups start to realize about this, we're going to start having other people come in. So I'm fine with not charging this fee, but I also want to know where that funding is going to come from, because if you've watched those 60 hours, you'll see that we have gone through the operations of the city, not just department by department, but employee by employee, program by program. Some people will say, well, there's got to be all this waste out there. Just find that waste and then you can fund all this. But I have not seen much of that hasn't been addressed. So if people have suggestions, and everybody will say, well, why don't you just cut the other guy's program? That's the waste. The waste is the adult leagues, or the waste is, whatever program I'm not using. And we've cut a lot of those programs. But in terms of just money lying around, it's just not there. But I think that maybe we hold off on this for now, because my guess is is your season starting now? Why don't we hold off on this and bring that report back right away and see if we can generate enough money to cover this fee?
I would support that proposal to place it on the agenda and dust off those reports. I'd like to see some nexus between the location of the advertising and the use of the money. In this case, something in the ball fields clearly would be relevant to the lights. Of course, there's issues of taste. Mr. Raghani's sitting there like, where are you guys going with this? I don't want to Dodger Stadium. But I'm sure there's room for a discussion on, and input from the community on tactful
we did that on the
branding, naming, if not outright advertising.
We did it on the bus benches.
Yes, we did.
So it sounds like there's consensus to hold off on this particular fee and pursue this avenue of generating additional revenue. And it doesn't mean that every group that comes in front of us is going to get the same reception, but it's very hard to say no to a bunch of kids who are being healthy and out there doing sports. I just wanted to say just a very brief comment about fees in general. The way that the fee study was done, so that people understand, was to really take a comprehensive look at what each program and service that's provided actually costs. That has never been done in the city. And it's very rare, is my understanding, that the city's even looked at those fees year after year to see if they were going to increase them. So some fees hadn't really been addressed in 20, 30, 50 years. But any fee that's not paid for by a particular person who's getting that service is being paid for by everybody, by the taxpayers of the city. So what the policy was that fees that really are for the benefit of the whole community, like the library, sports, whatever you consider to be, for the greater good, those were not fees we were going to generally increase, or we weren't going to increase them very much. The fees that we were looking more to increase were the ones that benefited specific individuals and where people had a choice whether to use those fees or not use those fees, like a developer who wanted to do grading, or someone who wanted to build or put an addition on their house. Because you could make more of an argument that why should the taxpayers subsidize that activity? That's something that person should pay for. And of course, there's a lot of those shades of gray along the process. But the idea was really, as we looked at those fees, to try to minimize or completely delete fees that were really for, the greater good of the people of Glendale, and to try to concentrate as much as we could on fees that benefited particular individuals, businesses, private property owners, that sort of thing. So I just want people to understand that even though the fee amounts, there's a certain amount that each activity or program costs, we are not proposing raising those fees to recover that cost in all instances. So it really was done with policy in mind, and for the goals that we as a city want to achieve. So it was not sort of a willy-nilly kind of thing. So that's number one. And then in terms of the budget as a whole, this is just a terrible year. I've only been on council. This is now my third budget. And people that have been here longer say this is maybe the worst they've ever seen. And it really is a combination of things. It's the same thing hitting the city in a giant or magnitude that's hitting everybody, which is a loss of revenue. As property taxes have gone down and there's a lot less sales of houses, we don't have that revenue coming in. As retail sales have gone down, we lose that revenue. We've all heard about the state taking more and more money from the cities, and if you look at a graph of what they've taken traditionally, you'll see it kind of go like this to deal with their problems, so we get to keep less and less of that revenue here. And then the employee salary and benefits. Mr. Milano is not wrong that that's been a huge hit too, and these are contracts and benefits that go back many years. We've been doing our best through this budget to get concessions, and not just, these are meaningful concessions. This is a big deal to the employees. I mean, they're really being asked to give back salary, to pay for the increases in the health care, for, lots and lots of those expensive items. So it's not that anybody's getting a free pass in this. I think that misery is being shared, and everybody's being asked to share that misery, including the employees. And that's correct. We should be doing that. So I just don't want anyone to think that we aren't addressing that, because we absolutely are doing our very best to address that. And we're not like a private business where we can just tell somebody, by the way, this is what you're going to get paid now. We have a process that we legally go through to meet and confer. Last year, we were able to do that with all but one of our employee groups. And in that group, we did take the very radical and painful step of imposing on them and saying, you know what, we can't come to agreement, and this is what we're going to do. Hopefully, we won't have to do that this year, but we're still in the middle of those negotiations. But I just want everyone to understand that we are taking this very seriously. I think if you ask any employee of the city, from their point of view, they've given up a lot. It may not be what everybody wants. It may not be what we want, but this is something that the organization as a whole, the entire city government, and the people that are providing those excellent services. You talked about the MacGyvers. That's those people. They're the ones that are being asked to take money out of their paycheck. At the end of the day, we do now have a balanced budget, assuming that we vote on this. And it's been very difficult, and it's going to be painful for a lot of people. But we've done the best we can to minimize that pain to the public. We really, truly have. I think we've been responsive. I think we've been responsible. I'm proud of my colleagues for spending 60 hours discussing this, taking the time to go through the budget line by line. The staff for providing that information. It's been difficult, but I think it's been valuable. And hopefully what we've done will set the stage for sustainable changes that will keep us from being in this situation in the future. That's really my goal, is to have systemic changes that address these issues going forward. Ms. Beers.
Madam Mayor, if I can just recap what we heard from City Council this evening, so that we do bring back to you a budget for adoption with the proper resolutions next week, and that is to keep the $10,000 for the Montrose Christmas Parade and continue to work with the Montrose Christmas Parade Association to reduce the other costs that we have in place. The DRB fees, as discussed with Hassan Hagani for the smaller projects, and the $5 fees for the field rates for the youth sports leagues, and look at the possibility of, first of all, not including that in the fee schedule brought to you next week, and look for funding and sponsorships elsewhere for that funding.
Okay.
Is that correct?
Well, I just have one unrelated thing to say. Since my name was personally brought up, I don't care to leave it there. First thing out of Mr. Mohill's mouth is I received money from one of the associations. He again shows his great stupidity. My disclosure forms are correctly done. He does not understand that in this state we have independent expenditure committees. If some organization wishes to do something for any candidate, unbeknownst to them, it's not their responsibility to know. Governor Brown surely used it himself to raise millions of dollars. Sit here and accuse me of accepting this money when I did not is just plain stupid. One final thing, he's also caused me in the past, he called me corrupt. I asked him to produce the evidence or apologize. He has done neither. So take it into account when he gets up here and says personal things about people that he can't stand behind because he doesn't know what he's talking about. Thank you.
If I can make one last comment, Madam Mayor, and that is a comment that Mr. Milano made regarding city employees. If they were to make a donation of $26, we would make the budget gap for the Rose Float. And I will say one thing about our city employees, and myself being one of them, in terms of the amount of hours that city employees in general give in volunteerism to service organizations within this community on their own time, whether it's in kind in terms of their time or it's checks that they write individually to the service organizations within this community. It's in the thousands and thousands of dollars and thousands of hours that we spend in this community because we love this community. So that's on behalf of the men and women who provide services to the 200,000 people in this community. And we already make a lot of donations in this community, and one of them is the Rose Float Association. I just wanted to make a comment on that.
Thank you for saying that.
Any other comments before we move on? Okay, Mr. Elliott.
Just to recap what Ms. Beer said, we'll make the adjustments in what we bring back to you next week. And just a final note on the fee study. Part of our goal was to get a comprehensive fee schedule, which we brought to you in a proposed form tonight, hopefully to adopt next week. And all the fees are broken down by every different section, so it's out there. We'll have it once adopted. It will be out on the website for anybody to see and include not only all our fees, but all the rates within the utilities, and as they change, it will be updated. So it's a real an effort on the city's part to get what we charge out to the public and for their review. And just a final comment, in the 8 pages on the community services and parks fees, I think there's only 4 or 5 changes in the fees from what were in place to what they're proposing, this $5 one being one of them. So there wasn't a whole lot of increases in the fees proposed from community services and parks. And just to reiterate, what we did through the fee study and the presentation was try to highlight the majority of the major changes within the fees. There's about 1,500 fees, so there was no chance, unless we wanted to spend an entire week going through each fee, to really review all of them. But we try to hit the highlights and are bringing it for adoption with the changes you mentioned. So with that, we'll make the changes and bring it back next week for adoption.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, want to close the hearing?
We'll close the public hearing. You have your direction. Okay, thank you. Next item, please.
Madam Mayor and Council, next item is oral communications. This is a full 5-minute portion where discussion is limited
There with
to...
the fees. You just dropped the fees.
Okay. My first card is Taylor Scott, to be followed by Cooper Coleman.
As he makes his way to the podium, we'll remind him that discussion is limited to items not part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. Members of the council may question the speaker or respond to the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision. And there will be 5 minutes placed on timer. The city manager may refer the matter to the appropriate department for investigation and report. Thank you. Begin whenever you're ready.
Hello, my name is Taylor Scott, and I'm talking wanted to bring up the proposed soccer field at Columbus Elementary School. What I'm passing out is 2 pictures from Google Earth on Columbus Elementary and Pacific Park, and underneath it are some numbers that I personally have come up with, so they're not scientific. There's no, plus or minus margin of error. One of the key things that is always brought up about the field is that it's supposed to be a joint use for the kids at Columbus Elementary, and then public use by AYSO. And one of the mission statements or philosophies of AYSO is that everyone plays. And in this particular proposal, everyone is not playing. AYSO is playing. That the field is supposedly joint use, but during the school year, it is blocked off from the children of Columbus Elementary School, so they are not actually allowed to play on it, except in rare occasions. So if it is indeed supposed to be a joint use field, it is not jointly used. It seems to be mainly built for AYSO, which means that the only people playing are AYSO, the people who built the field, and the city, not the community in which it has been placed. Things that show that it is not necessarily the best place for this field is that there are 6 proposed changes that will be needed to be implemented at Columbus Elementary School, and there is 1 proposed necessary change for the field at Pacific Park. So at Columbus Elementary School, they need to put in turf, lights, bathroom, shed, gates, and a fence. At Pacific Park, they need to put in turf. And I heard earlier on the budget or things that you guys were talking about that there seems to be problems with paying for lighting. So I don't understand why you would put in another park that requires additional lighting that will increase the need for more electrical use, therefore more fees perhaps. And let's see what else. I would like the council to keep in mind that this is an already multi-family, high-density area. By putting in a field that AYO simply wants, they don't need it, they want an additional field. I don't think that we should bear the burden of their desire. If an alternative already in the EIR is available, and it is a perfectly good alternative. The community of Glendale does not want to deny the children of Glendale a field. They simply wish them to put it in a more appropriate place. There are triple the amount of parking spaces at Pacific Park as compared to the field at Columbus Elementary. And to say that scheduling changes will provide the necessary mitigation is simply disingenuous, because it simply won't happen. So I ask the council to utilize the alternative that is proposed in the EIR at Pacific Park and not overburden the Glendale community with a proposed joint field. Thank you.
Thank you. Cooper Coleman, followed by Herbert Milano.
Will do.
I'm passing around a copy of an article that was placed in the Glendale News Press on June 4th. This article is titled "Residents Speak Out Against the Field," and it shows a photograph of the field at Columbus Elementary School. If you'll look at the black shadow in the lower right-hand corner, that shadow was created by a multi-family residential structure which is directly adjacent to that field. The left-hand corner, left-hand edge of that field, just inside that left-hand dark shadow, is a lighter gray area. That's a culvert that is on the western edge of the field. That light brown area in the far right edge of the dark shadow is the edge of the building, directly adjacent to that field. There's a distance of 5.5 feet from that culvert to the building. I submit that any field that is that close to a multifamily residential area does not need 70-foot floodlights. That's going to be directly adjacent to that building. That dirt strip right there, that light beige strip, is where people are going to be standing and cheering. It's 5.5 feet from an apartment building. I live in that apartment building. I beg you not to have 300 or 400 people, as the gentleman back there pointed out, cheering until 10 o'clock at night outside my bedroom window. Please don't do it. It's too close. The draft environmental impact report identified a perfectly acceptable alternative at Pacific Park where no multifamily residences share the same block with the sports field. We not only share the same block, it's 5.5 feet. You can walk through and touch the field, fence, and the building with my hands, and I'm not that tall. 5.5 feet from that field. They're going to put 70-foot tall floodlights 5.5 feet from that building. There is no way that's going to be an acceptable living environment for people to have 70-foot floodlights on till 10 o'clock every single night. Every night. And all day on the weekends. Please. Come on. You wouldn't do it to yourselves. Please don't do it to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Herbert Milano, followed by Anna Rundle.
Honorable Mayor Friedman, members of the City Council and staff, my name is Herbert Milano. Yesterday, the Glendale Water and Power released the June 30th, 2010 financial reports, nearly 1 year after the utility closed its books. Now, if I read this correctly, the utility did receive the final release from the auditors back in November of last year. And I was really curious to find out why it has taken so long to release the financial reports of an entity that accounts for 50% of the city's overall budget. Since 1999, the financial reports of the city have been completed and released in 6 months, usually by the end of the year, and usually trying to meet the very last possible date of its potential release according to California law. That means that for 6 months out of the year, every single year, you are making significant decisions about the budget in the dark. The last time the City of Glendale finished its reports in 3 months, its financial reports, was in 1998. And I think that was an incredibly commendable event that should have served as a guideline for future years. Corporations, large and small, provide a full financial accounting within 3 months. I don't understand why the city cannot provide the same thing by the end of September every year, so that at least during the last 3 months of the year you have a full acknowledgement of what has transpired the year before. I've been trying to do an analysis of Glendale's trends, and even though there are many changes that occur from year to year, I would have to be oftentimes requested to pay for kind of information that should be readily available to anyone wanting to do a proper analysis of the city's expenditures. I presented before you many of the city's expenditures that I believe have grown out of control. And it is important for the City Council to receive those trends, if not from within the staff, from within outside. And I think that having timely financial reports is exceedingly important to make sure that we are providing the proper counsel to the City Council with regard to what is taking place if you're not receiving those analyses from the internal staff. I want to highlight a couple of other things as well, if I may, the last 2 minutes I have. When the City Council members took the oath of office, you swore to uphold the California Constitution. And that includes Proposition 13 and Proposition 218 that amended Proposition 13 and now Proposition 26. You swore to uphold the Constitution. And this particular action that I and others have had with regard to having you comply with the California Constitution should not be placed or framed in a way as if we were against youth and children and other things. It has to do simply with abiding by the law. We have a City Council member who is an attorney, and as an attorney, more than anyone else here, you should know that you should uphold California Constitution. Proposition 218 tried to correct the manners in which many cities try to circumvent Proposition 13 by overburdening taxpayers and ratepayers by adding on to the utility rates charges that they should not be bearing as property owners. And I am a property owner here in the city of Glendale, and I have paid hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxes. As such, I feel that it is my prerogative to ensure that the City Council and all of its members uphold California law. And if California law says that you cannot transfer water rates to the general fund, you should do so. And I am glad that the city attorney finally decided to concur with the other rulings that were given with regard to Proposition 218 and abide by the rule of law and the California Constitution. It is incredibly unfair to sit in the audience after we make a presentation and have our words misdirected or placed or framed in such a way that they were not intended. I would like in the future to have a little bit of respect with regard to those issues that I bring before you. But I think that upholding the California Constitution, like the U.S. Constitution, is a mandate to all of you. Thank you very much.
Anna Rundle, followed by Charles Hooker.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and councilmen and staff and to all of you. I'm here tonight. My name is Anna Rundle, and I'm with the League of Women Voters, and tonight I'm representing them about a subject we haven't discussed yet tonight, which is the city's campaign finance and ethics ordinances. This is something with which the League of Women Voters has been involved for some time. And we wrote a letter recently, which was published in our wonderful Glendale News Press newspaper. And what I'm here for tonight is to make certain that some people who might not get to see that newspaper, or for that matter, some people who may have seen the newspaper and don't remember every vital word that was in the letter that we wrote, I'm going to read it to you. It's short, I promise. The City Council is preparing to take a hard look at the city's campaign finance and ethics ordinances. The campaign finance ordinance adopted in 2008 obviously needs refinement given the problems that have arisen as a result of the ADI investigation. And the city currently has no ordinance requiring paid lobbyists to register. One of the tenets of campaign finance reform is that the appearance of corruption is as bad as actual corruption. No actual corruption has been uncovered, but plenty of mud has been slung based on the appearance of corruption because some candidates in the 2007 and 2009 municipal elections accepted thousands of dollars in donations from ADI subcontractors working on a city-funded project. So in light of the above, the Glendale Burbank League of Women Voters is urging the City Council to model any revisions they make to the ordinance after the recently passed City of Los Angeles Measure H. Measure H prohibits, when certain contract limits are met, campaign contributions from contractors and subcontractors, and further prohibits both groups from hosting events to raise funds for a candidate. The same rules should apply to all applicants for entitlements and suppliers of materials to a city-funded project. Measure H also places the remedy for a violation squarely on the shoulders of the donor by barring the donor from receiving any contract. The city's current ordinance does not contain a similar solution to violations of the prohibition on donations. Another important goal of campaign finance reform is leveling the playing field. Council's April 26 staff report on amending the campaign finance ordinance sounds an alarm on this front. Discussions regarding dropping the $5,000 limit on the amount of funds a candidate can lend to his or her campaign, raising the amount of post-election funds a council member can raise above the current $10,000 ceiling, and lengthening the amount of time in which those funds can be raised are steps in the wrong direction. Clearly, incumbents have the advantage in an election as a result of their official positions. Increasing the size of an incumbent's office holder account allows a council member to increase his or her exposure in the community. Furthermore, it works against efforts to stem the perceived or actual influence of money. Council members on the Burbank City Council are not allowed to maintain office holder accounts. Once the election is over, all candidates, including incumbents, must terminate their campaign accounts. And finally, It's time to live up to the campaign promise to increase transparency and require registration of paid lobbyists so that the public knows who is working behind the scenes. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Charles Hooker, followed by Mike Mohill.
My name is Charles Hooker. I'm native of Glendale, and City Council people, I would like to ask a couple of questions. We had an article in the Glendale News Press improving traffic safety in Armenia. And why do we give a rat's behind about an Eastern European country? This is what I don't understand, what the Glendale News Press and we are getting all worked up about. And we have traffic safety in Glendale. We have European drivers who do not respect the laws. The person who wrote this article evidently is very biased. I've read her articles before from this Glendale News Press, and I don't understand why we are so concerned about the improving safety in a foreign country. We have enough to do in Glendale to keep going in Glendale and worrying about our drivers that we have here. I know I will be censored and have some remark made after I sit down, but a famous quotation, "The truth will set you free, and I am free." Thank you.
Thank you. Mike Mohill, followed by Serge Adamian.
Good evening, Mayor Friedman and council members. My name is Mike Mohill. Councilman Weaver, do you remember in 2009, reported in the Glendale News Press, the California Fair Political Practice Commission fined you $9,000 for campaign violation? I guess that wasn't corruption, was it? Thank you.
No.
The after party. We'll talk about that later. Thank you.
By definition, it is not corruption.
You're taking up my time, Mr. Weaver.
Okay, then I want you to explain to him after.
Okay, may I have my time? Thank you. During candidate forums, Councilman Dave Weaver often told the public the average city worker retires with a pension of about $27,000. And he said he had received no campaign money from the city unions. Was Mr. Weaver using fuzzy math when he defined the word average? Recently reported in the Glendale News Press, nearly 30% of the city workforce of 2,400 earned at least $100,000 a year. If this were true, how could the average city worker retire with a pension of about $27,000? Was the GANP using fuzzy math, or was it Mr. Weaver? The unions were smart this past year. They went around by not publicly endorsing or giving campaign money to any of the incumbent candidates or challengers. But what they didn't tell the public was the Police Political Action Committee, PAC, sent out a mailer endorsing Councilman Dave Weaver at a cost of $8,612. And the same association spent an additional $3,000 on political polling on his behalf. Although no campaign money was given to former Councilman John Draymond by the City Firefighters Union, they supported him by walking the streets campaigning for him. In the wisdom of our city fathers, Article 23, Section 25 of the city's charter states, quote, "Political activity. Neither the city manager nor any person in the employ of the city shall take any active part in the securing or shall contribute toward the nomination or the election of candidates for municipal office," end of quote. But employees went around the charter and formed PACs, Political Action Committees, which today are unregulated as to how much money they can spend on candidates. Furthermore, except for Councilman Manukian, our 4 sitting council members have been endorsed or received money from the unions. City activists a few years ago were able to influence the council to limit to $1,000 the amount any candidate can receive, any person, entity, or company, but not PACs or corporations. Is the council seat so important that council members are willing to sell their souls to the unions, Mr. Weaver? Nowadays, Councilman Weaver is quoted as saying the city got ripped off and gave away the kitchen sink when negotiating with the unions in the past. Having sat in labor negotiation for years, didn't he have many opportunities to say no to the unions? To reduce city labor expenses, the city manager and council pat themselves on the back and say how magnanimous the unions have been to make concessions on their labor contracts. But in reality, no hard bargaining occurred, and council members just kicked the can down the road. Tonight will probably be no different, as 4 councilmen have received in the past thousands of dollars of campaign money from the 4 city unions. According to the seniority system, the unions will allow their newest employee to be pink-slipped first, which will perpetuate their $100,000 a year membership club. This will also mean continued millions of dollars in pension obligations. Until the voters get mad enough, and because of reduced expected city services and increases in taxes, fees, and rates, perhaps then and only then will the people become angry enough to vote only for council candidates who are not beholden to the city unions. $100,000 a year plus pension for life should be unacceptable for retired city workers, while the people who have to pay these pensions live on Social Security. Thank you.
Serge Damien, followed by Thomas Alexanian.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, I'm Serge Damian. I'm representing Armenian Society of Los Angeles. I'm a member. We are requesting intervention by the council for expedited hearing the appeal of the CUP decision of the new ASLA Center. We request that the hearing to be held in the next 2 weeks instead of the scheduled August 3rd by the Planning Commission. ASLA has constant operating expenses. Delay in granting CUP causes irreparable damage to ASLA due to inability to generate revenues. Multiple events have been and are being canceled, and new requests for events are being turned away. ASLA has waited 8 years to reopen an operating and functioning center. We cannot afford additional delays because of heavy financial burden. Our neighbor that has filed appeal wants to have activities on Sunday, but denied the same opportunity to ASLA. They have not demonstrated why both entities cannot have activities concurrently on Sunday. Our parking is in the marketplace structure, and access will be from the alley, while the church patrons park on Louise. The appellant had full knowledge of the Sunday activities that could have made it part of the settlement agreed in 2008. The appellant did not demonstrate why they had to wait 3 years to raise the issue by way of an appeal to ASLA CUP application at this critical moment to the ASLA operation. To us, the appellant is breaching the terms of the 2008 settlement. It is fundamentally wrong to reach a settlement and use every means to chip away new concessions. We made offers to accommodate the other side, but every time we've done so, they have taken it as a sign of weakness and made additional demands. We request that the City Council to intervene for expedited processing of the appeal. Thank you.
Thank you. Thomas Alexanian, followed by Margaret Hammond. Sorry, I'm losing my voice.
Good evening, Honorable Madam Mayor, council members and staff. My name is Tomik Alexanian, resident of the jewel city of Glendale for over 32 years. I am here today before you to express my concerns in relation to the activities of Armenian Society of Los Angeles at the newly built beautiful cultural center. As a trustee member, I have proudly served my society since its move to Glendale in 1979. City of Glendale and Crusoe Holdings, after lengthy negotiation, convinced the ASLA to move its center to a different location in order to clear the way for Americana to become a reality. An MOU signed by parties clearly introduce and commit that ASLA move should have been seamless. And more importantly, ASLA should and must be able to practice and operate with all the conditions and privileges existent in accordance with the rules and regulations that ASLA had been enjoying for over 20 years at its center on Brand Boulevard. Needless to say that our relocation took over 7 years as a result of delay and rejection of our original building plans, a lawsuit that stopped the commencement of the construction, coupled with other obstacles. We have lost valuable members and deprived from having our activities for not having proper temporary location for the past 8 years. Finally, our members' dream came true and we moved to start a new beginning, to serve the entire Armenian community of the Glendale and preserve our rich spiritual and cultural values. Unfortunately, our CUP application, which meet all conditions and was approved by the Planning Commission, has been appealed by our neighbor over an issue which it could have been raised at any time during the last 3 years. But they have chosen to do it at this critical time. We expect and kindly request that the Council intervene and resolve this vital issue without further delay to prevent potential devastating effects to our future activities. Thank you.
Thank you. Margaret Hammond's my last card.
Good evening again, Madam Mayor, members of the council, staff, and audience. My name is Margaret Hammond. First off, and most important, as I say, free bulky item pickup, 818-548-3916. By using this phone number, you will help to keep Glendale clean and beautiful. And it's really important that we do that. I recently read an article in a paper, I'm not going to name it. It was about a year ago when Chief DePompa first started talking about the parolees going to be brought back into the community. And a lot of people said, oh, he's just making a big do about nothing. And that he was actually using this early release of the parolees like a bogeyman to scare the citizens of Glendale. Now, as we know, we are now seeing the results of some of the results of those early releases into Glendale. One of them was in the paper this week. I should have got it out, but I was so amazed by it that a man that was a parolee was going into people's houses up on, I think it was Allen and Irving and Western, in the middle of the night and literally living in the houses with them. And when they caught him, he was an early parolee. And I've read several more of those items, the crime items and so forth. So it's coming to fruition. And it's very difficult for the police, of course, because, again, they're shorthanded. There's so many other problems in the city. But these parolees are adding to that. So anybody that wants to criticize the police, go ahead and do it. And maybe you'll have somebody coming and living in your house in the middle of the night. So that would be something to think about. And by the way, Burbank, by the way, I was driving up and down, going on San Fernando Road, whatever. And the amazing thing is, once you leave Glendale, I hadn't realized the roads get really bumpety and bangety. in Burbank. I guess it was 2 days ago. I was like, really, all of a sudden it went ding, ding, what's the matter here? You know. So we do have to thank Mr. Zern's department for getting us our streets redone and making us one of the best cities in Southern California. And I do want to make one more remark. I was one of the ones regarding the Armenian whatever society selling their property on Brand and got $12 million for a piece of property that was appraised at $900,000. The properties, each side of them, that's what they were appraised at. And, you know, I've still got all those articles. I kept all that stuff that I was supplied with on the appraisals on the property. So I really don't know what's going on because the church is suffering too. And there's going to be big problems. I mean, that building never should have been put into that small lot with no parking, which is completely ridiculous. We know that in that area it's already impacted with a couple of banquet halls, with the people from Americana when they don't want to pay to park, come over. I happen to be involved with a group that owns property and that's being used by the valet service free and whatever because they take the cars and bring them over the block or so where we have our property. And short of us having to chain it off at quite an expense, I guess we're going to suffer along with all that. So I'm just saying, you know, you dump these things without adequate parking all over the city, and then who pays the price? Who pays it? The people that are the neighbors of those properties without proper parking. Okay, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Thank you. That was my last card. Mr. Weaver?
Regarding the Armenian Society of Los Angeles, I was one of those most bitterly opposed to that amount of money. Not that much, but the money going to that. That's past history. When they had their dedication, I was there. I toured the building with my friends who belong to the ASLA. It's a great building. It's a Christian environment. I enjoyed it very much. Lately, I've been working with the ASLA because they had attempted to secure their liquor license. And when it went through, there's a 12-day appeal period, if anybody wants to. On the last day in the afternoon, at the very last minute, the church filed an appeal against that group, the ASLA. They objected to alcohol, in this case wine or whatever, being served at 10 in the morning on Sunday, for which Armenian Society of Los Angeles members have events, births, marriages, whatever. And the church did not want it at 10. They wanted it later. I am very disappointed in the church. Waiting to the last minute, they had 12 days to do.
Garcia, are we stepping beyond the...
Just because this is an appeal that will go to the Planning Commission, Mr. Weaver, wait, hold on, and ultimately could get appealed to the City Council.
Okay, let me back off that. It may not. I've been working with Jillian Van Meiden.
I understand there are some issues with respect to a particular agreement that the parties, the city, the ASLA, and the church all signed, and those issues are being addressed, but because there's still a possibility that that hearing could go forward, I would just ask that we not give any indication of the pros or cons of the appeal.
Oh, I know, because when it comes to us, if it goes there.
That's correct.
Hopefully, mediation will take care of it. Jillian Van Meiden is working with the parties to try to resolve it so it doesn't go through an appeal process.
And that is correct.
I can say that.
Say that.
Okay. The second component is the breakthrough from the garage across the alley into the back of the ASLA headquarters. Checked with Mr. Zern. That had to go out for bids for a contract. The bids have been open. Next week the bids will be open. Come to council, award it, then they'll cut open the marketplace garage for them to enter. That was part of the agreement before that I don't think I agreed with, but that's past history.
and I was wondering why that hadn't been done. It is going to be done short term. Then they can operate wholly. Right now, there's two components, and neither one of them been solved, and I've been working with Julie Van Meiden and the SLA for over a month now, trying to get this resolved. That's the one issue. The other thing, Mr. Mohill has left. He's already declared he's a council candidate in the next election, so one of the three of you, he's after your seat. But in issues of corruption, I asked the city attorney, Mr. Howard, what I was fined for, which he was intimately knowledgeable about, was that corruption? And the answer was no, that is not corruption. So again, Mr. Mohill doesn't know what he's talking about. You don't have to respond like I asked, because Scott Howard knows what he's talking about. So, but I'm going to face this. I got 4 years, 3 years, 10 months. I'm going to hear this every week for something that happened back in 2005. Boy, nothing new on me, huh? Thank you and have a good evening.
Are you declaring your candidacy for the 2015 election?
I don't know. I don't plan. My wife doesn't plan on me doing it anymore. I've taken this kind of crap since 2004 now.
The question asked by the speaker was whether we could move that CUP hearing up.
If I may respond to that, Madam Mayor, I was not aware that there was a desire to move the hearing up, but I actually request that we do not discuss that at this point. I will intend to that, and I will call the speakers. Every time an appeal is being requested to be moved up or back, we really have to go through a process, and we will follow the procedure like we would with any applicant. We definitely can consider it, and if there are ways to address it, we will. But I cannot answer to what date or whether or not we can, because there's a process to follow. Both the appellant and the applicant need to be involved in that decision.
And besides that, our rules for oral communication state that we're not going to have discussion or debate on a topic. So it's been brought forward, and we can have staff address that, but we can't tonight make any decisions by our rules. Any other comments? Have we finished, Mr. Quintero?
I'd like to place on the agenda a renaming of this portion of the meeting. I think the clerk calls it oral communications, but I'd like to have it renamed State Your Hatred, because that's all I hear up here. Margaret, the hate that you exude when you talk about those people who were on brand. Mr. Hooker, the newspaper wrote a column on someone about the traffic situation in Armenia, comparing it to what's going on in Glendale. And if that offends you so much, if it was the traffic situation in Munich or London, I don't think you would have said a peep. But that nasty word, Armenia, oh my God, that probably makes you do flip-flops out of this room. And as far as Mr. Milano, all I hear from him is hatred. Hatred for the city. Hatred for the city council. Hatred for the city manager. Hatred for every single one of us. And I think he does hate the kids. I'm going to lay that blame on him, because when he talks about the money that was going from the illegal, unconstitutional, unlawful, criminal use of funds from the water fund, well, these are the types of programs that are being cut back. They're being cut back from parades, from kids playing ball, from kids getting horseback riding lessons. And, his complaint is that he leaves the room. Well, he's gone now. I would have invited him up for a debate if you would have let me. You probably wouldn't have let me, but I would have invited him up here. The junk and the hatred that he spews in his essays, he calls them essays, good Lord, from that blog that he writes. And he's here complaining that we get the last word in when he talks about personal issues and insults every single one of us. Well, not every single one of us. He does have a new friend, contributor perhaps, to his essays. Every single one of us, from our professional life to our personal life, it's just hatred. That's all I'm hearing. I'm very disappointed. I mean, this part of oral, I won't even get into Mr. Mohill. Okay? I mean, I think I'm going to leave that to Mr. Weaver's rebuttals and all that. It has really degraded. I think this city is better than this. I think we have better citizens that come up here and discuss hatred. I'm not talking about suggesting ways we do things better. This is just outright hate. And I'm sure that every single one of you watching on TV has your own opinion on that. I'm sure many of you are agreeing with what I have to say, and particularly the speakers that have been here today. We don't need that in the city. If you want to be positive, be positive. And there's a way to be positive even when you criticize. Suggest better ways of doing things, but we don't get that. And I'm sorry. I really think it should be called State Your Hatred. It's got a catchy name to it, and it's much more apt than the vanilla oral communications. Each speaker shall be allowed 5 minutes. Council may question or respond. State your hatred. Thank you, Madam.
May I move that we adjourn unless there's new...
Second.
We are adjourned. Thank you.